Welcome everybody to the joint meeting here of the Norton Planning Board, Norton Finance Committee, and Norton Select Board. So first I'll call the Norton Planning Board to order here, and then I'll pass to the Select Board, to the FinCom.
And we'll call the Finance Committee meeting to order.
All right, I'll call the Select Board meeting to order. We have Denise, Kevin, Roger, and myself. Alan could not make it tonight, and we're going to start our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you both. Just to get everything rolling with a couple of ground rules here. Again, this is a hybrid public meeting, so members of the public are welcome to participate in person or remotely. If you are joining via Zoom, we ask that you please mute your lines when not speaking, as we do have 57 people in the Zoom call, so if everybody was off mute, that would get pretty crazy all the time, so thank you very much in advance. If you are looking to speak, you can please use the react function in the Zoom meeting. It may appear with a heart icon. That'll do a little hand raise, and we'll be able to see that and know that you're looking to speak. In person, obviously, we can get everybody up to the podium so that way they can be heard on the Zoom. So, just in terms of agenda items here for our joint meeting here with the Select Board and Finance Committee, we have two agenda items. One is a discussion to refine the MBA to community zoning for town meeting. And the second one, which will follow thereafter, is discussion and potential vote, that'll be up to the other committees, to vote to recodify the zoning bylaw for town meeting. And just again clarify, the MBTA communities discussion is an informational meeting. The official noticed meeting per the notice in the Sun Chronicle will be next week at the April 8th Planning Board meeting. So, any questions before we move ahead from everybody? Okay. So with that, we'll get into our discussion around the MBTA community zoning. Paul, if you wanted to share the presentation here, which all the members have gotten in advance here, and we can go through. So we have a presentation here that will cover an overview of the topic for anybody who hasn't been following along with the planning board's meetings over the past year plus or so. And we also have a special guest from CHAPA, who is one of the state agencies working with lots of planning boards around the state, who will give some information as well. So just to reset here, this is an initiative to comply with Mass General Law 40A, Chapter 3. In terms of the time frame here, we are here at our joint hearing here, public meetings. Paul, on the second slide. Sorry, I'm going too fast for it. The goal is again to have a completed article for April 10th, so that way it's on the ballot, printed with no changes needed on the floor for our spring town meeting on May the 19th. So it's just again some baseline on what the district is and what the compliance requirements are from the state regarding this MBTA law. So Norton qualifies according to the state guidelines as an MBTA adjacent community, meaning we don't have a transit stop in town, but we are adjacent to one that does. The state regulations require one zoning district, which allows multifamily properties as of right, as in not subject to a special permit. The requirement is that Norton allow at least 15 units per acre, and the district must be at least 50 acres, excluding wetlands, state-owned properties, etc. And if you multiply 15 by 50, you get Norton's target of 750 units, which again, as I've said probably a number of times, this is a number on paper and not necessarily reflective of what might actually be built. The other note is that this zone cannot be subject to age restrictions, so it cannot be an over 55 community or anything like that, and it must be suitable for families with children. What is not required under the regulation is that it does not require the town, on to the next one, Paul. It does not require the town to provide the land, produce the housing, and it can't force the owners of the land to sell it to anybody. It also doesn't require the town to provide or pay for any needed infrastructure, doesn't require building types that don't align with the town aesthetics, and there is no requirement to develop. It only has to provide the opportunity to develop or replace existing uses and structures over time. It also does not supersede any environmental regulations that are in place. So more than half of the cities and towns in the state are required to comply. And again, not all of this would be developed at all or all at once. So just something to keep in mind here. We have one slide here talking about financial penalties for non-compliance. There are a number written into the regulation. There are a number of grant programs which the state has said you are not eligible for if you are not compliant by the deadline. The state has also been wielding, I will just say, a big stick in applying this eligibility toward any grant or any discretionary funding they have authority over. They have written it into grants for fire safety equipment and everything else that they can think of. So compliance makes us eligible for these. Non-compliance means we are not eligible for them. Since 2018, we've received $4.5 million in grants from these programs combined. And finally, the last one that actually not the last one, but one of the last ones that I'll get to here. We've all seen a lot of things covering in the news about different towns suing the state, suing different agencies about this regulation. The most recent one was the auditor of the Commonwealth determined that the Communities Act was an unfunded mandate and raised a whole bunch of questions about what that meant, what that stood for, what direct or indirect costs the state should be expected to pay. All of this has really kind of led to a lot of discussion about should the town approve anything? Should the town sue the state? All those things. From the planning board perspective, our job is to put together an article that we can present at town meeting with you, will pass at town meeting. In terms of what happens at whether the town takes action against the state or something else, that's something that we feel is more appropriate for the select board to address. So, Steve, if you wanted to comment.
Yeah, I'll make a quick comment on this. The select board hasn't decided or even discussed fighting it. My personal opinion is it's an unfunded mandate and it's an overreach by the state. But again, we haven't done that, and I think at this point we're all in agreement to have it brought to town meeting and see what happens there.
Thank you, Steve. And obviously, following town meeting in the fall, one of the feedback that we got was that we wanted to have more engagement with people across town. I'll thank Paul DiGiuseppe, the town planner, who has been doing a lot of community outreach with all the different groups around town. You can see that we've hosted 5 public hearings about this. It feels like more.
And that's just since December.
That's just since December. We've also used social media a lot. We've noticed 450 property owners and abutters for all the proposed areas that we're going to talk about. There was a note included in the excise tax bill, and it's been posted at dozens of businesses and community groups. So I don't think there's a whole lot of people in town who don't know that we've been talking about this. So with that, I'll kind of get back away from the procedural things here, and I do want to introduce Will Radigan from CHAPA here. He's going to give some just kind of overview and guidance from the state, talk about some of the financial impacts of everything as it's been studied, and go from there. So, Will, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Am I appropriate distance for the mic right now? Okay, thanks. Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks a lot for having me here. Really great to be joining you all. I'm from an organization called the Citizens Housing and Planning Association. To be clear, I'm not here from the state or from a state agency. We're a nonprofit. Our role is to support policies that make housing more affordable for people with low to moderate incomes. And what we're doing here is helping communities with their community engagement around this law. We do this for laws like this and also other state housing policies that impact communities to try to make sure there's solid shared understanding of what these policies mean and how they affect your community. Just to reiterate, not the state, didn't write the law, but here to tell you what it is and how it's going to affect our community. So we can move on. So yeah, I just want to give a quick primer on what the MBTA Communities Act is and where it came from. sounds like just about everyone's here has heard a good bit about it already, but quick overview. Passed in 2020 by the legislature, signed by Governor Baker in 2021, so very bipartisan law, passed almost unanimously by a Democratic legislature, signed by a Republican governor. A lot of support across the board. I think it's gotten more controversial since then, but really started from both parties. It was part of an economic development bill, which is something I'll get into later. Might be kind of surprising that this is considered economic development, but there's good reason for that. And simply what it does, it requires every community that is either home to an MBTA stop or next to one that is, to create a zoning district where multifamily housing is allowed. And I'll talk more about zoning, because first and foremost, this is a zoning reform law, and what's unique about it and why we're doing all this engagement work is it allows communities to choose where in town they want to rezone. Other states have undertaken similar initiatives where they've merely decided, okay, we need to create more housing, we're going to do rezoning from the state level. Massachusetts values that tradition, we have local control here, and while trying to take action at the state level, is trying to delegate the responsibility of deciding where housing should go to communities, and that's what makes it unique. And why it exists, first and foremost, it's reduce red tape and make housing more affordable. Yeah, Paul, we can go to the next one, talk about that. So why was it passed? I think there's a lot of reasons it is the way it is, like why it has transit involved, but first and foremost, it's about housing affordability, and I think the graph here tells you everything you need to know. We've seen home values, home prices, and rents just absolutely skyrocket in the last decade. 73% since 2016 in Massachusetts, Norton following right along, a little bit lower, but while Norton used to be one of the more affordable places to live, if you look at housing prices today, you'll realize that is not the case as it once was, and that is what prompted the state to take action. And this is one of the steps the state is trying to take to make housing more affordable. Am I all good in volume? I see a note that I'm muted. Yeah. Okay. Great. Perfect. So I want to give some context about the kind of affordability issues we're facing statewide. All good?
It looked like the Norton Media Center and laptop muted again. I saw you unmuted and then it muted itself again.
Somebody must be muted.
Somebody is muting it.
Who's the host?
Who's doing it?
Thank you.
Stop it.
All good? Okay, great. Yeah, so just to put in perspective why we're here talking about this, why the state wants to do something about housing, looking at how unaffordable it is for people looking for housing right now. If you own your home right now, you're very lucky and you may be in great shape, but I want to give an idea of what the market looks like for people that are buying or renting right now. So I took this from my presentation to the school committee. So typical job someone might have in Norton, public school teacher, starting salary, almost $50,000 a year. We consider housing affordable if you're paying no more than 30% of your before-tax income on it. And so for someone making about $50K, that comes out to a little more than $1,200 a month. Median rent right now is $2,600, so you're not there with two people. One person, you're completely out of luck. And at 20% down with our current high interest rates to purchase the median home price in Norton at $550,000, again, below the state average, you're looking at $3,200 a month. So, we're looking at almost triple what starting school teachers making, which is completely out of reach. And, to put into perspective what it would take to afford housing here, to buy a median home in Norton today, you need to be making $128,000 a year. So, just we're seeing housing really out of reach for so many people. I want to go a little more into that in the next slide. And it's not only people looking for housing trying to move here, maybe kids moving back home, or folks downsizing who are hurting from this. It really is people that live here now. So again, we consider housing affordable if you're spending no more than 30% of your income on it, and we consider you extremely cost burdened if you're spending more than 50% of your income on it. And in Norton right now, almost 25% of homeowners can't afford the home they're in right now. So they may have lived here for a long time, and they're spending more than 30%, or in solid 10% of cases, more than 50% of their income on housing. And for renters, that is way worse. That is almost 50% of people in Norton can't afford the housing that they're in right now. So that means they're at risk of potential foreclosure. It means that they're at risk of eviction. They could be getting forced out of state. Big picture, housing is really getting very unaffordable, not just for people moving here, but for people that live here right now. And so we really, I think, should be thinking about what solutions we can bring forward. This is one of those efforts, not the only one. And what's the consequence of that? This is something I always highlight because it's close to home for me, because I'm 27 and I'm seeing this in my generation. What's the impact of this housing affordability on Massachusetts? The most glaring one, and why this is an economic development bill, is that it's driving young people out of the state. We've seen Massachusetts lose more residents than it gained in the last 2 years. But what's really remarkable is that that's not for all groups. It's really most significantly happening among people from age 25 to 44. So people that are in the prime of their lives, they're launching their careers, they're buying their first homes, they're renting, maybe starting families, and when it comes time to buy a house, they realize it doesn't pencil out to stay here, and they leave for places like North Carolina, Texas, Florida, where they can keep their good jobs or find other good jobs and pay radically less for housing. And we're losing a lot of people to the states. It's not just hypothesis either. There have been surveys that have been done about young professionals in Boston. When people talk about why they're leaving the area, the number 1 and 3 reasons are the cost of rent and buying a home. So we're seeing young people leave the state because of this. And for the economy, that's a big issue, right? Young people are the next generation of business owners, they're employees for our local businesses, teachers, first responders, healthcare workers, all the people that make our communities run. If they're moving to Texas before they get into their careers, that really is an issue for the future of the economy, and so it's something that economic development-wise we really have to try to address somehow. So moving on. So yeah, you all know housing's expensive. Maybe I don't need to tell you that. If you're paying rent or you bought your house recently, you certainly know this. But the question is why? And like most things that are expensive, the answer is pretty simple: supply and demand. We used to build a lot more housing in Massachusetts in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. You can see on the graph we built a lot of housing. And then in the 90s, that really slowed down, and it have not recovered. It's actually gotten worse. And although you can see in blue, we used to build a lot of single-family housing, and then in black, a lot of multifamily housing. In the 90s, we stopped building multifamily housing for the most part altogether. Right? We only built a very small bit of it. That's recovered a bit again, but it's not up to the levels that it was in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So our population has continued to grow until recently, when we've seen some declines. We've certainly seen more households as we're seeing smaller families, so you're seeing the same number of people living in more households than before. And all that together with fewer homes mean more competition for the same homes, which means really high prices. And the spike we're seeing now is a result of 30 years of really slow home production. So we need to find ways to boost home production if we're going to make it more affordable for people that live here and want to live here. Going on. But why is it so hard to build homes in Massachusetts? We don't have to guess. Again, CHAPA works as a convener across the housing industry, talking to a lot of, am I on camera? I'm Will Radigan, I'm from CHAPA, but I don't know if I'm on camera. We talk to a lot of developers, advocates, tenants, about lenders, about what makes housing hard to build. And the answer we got again and again and again for literally decades is zoning in Massachusetts. We have some of the strictest zoning in the country that makes it really difficult to build homes. And because of that, there are not enough opportunities to build compared to other states. Therefore, we don't build as much, and they're building elsewhere, so people go elsewhere. So, zoning. This is a zoning reform law. Let's talk a little bit about what that is in the next one. So I think this is just important to address from like a conceptual level, because I think there are a lot of misconceptions on what zoning actually means. People often think like a rezoning means your land is being taken for some reason or being reused by someone. But very simply, zoning is the set of rules for how whoever owns a piece of land can use it. So zoning determines the allowed shape and height of buildings, the use, so whether you can use it for housing, for commercial, for an industrial use, and then things like the distance between buildings, how far they need to be set back from the road, these kind of dimensional requirements. Is a rule book for how you can use your land. And right now, in Massachusetts, over 80% of our land is zoned exclusively for single-family homes, meaning you can't build anything else. You own the land, it's a single family home, you cannot build anything but a single family home on that property even if you want to. It's just not legally an option for you. And in many towns, I don't know if this is the case in Norden, but we require an acre or more per lot for single family homes. And so now that we're fairly built out, at 1 acre per lot, there aren't a lot of opportunities to build more. And that's where we're beginning. And so zoning reform is not the only solution to the housing issues we're facing. It's not even maybe long-term going to be like the most of many solutions, but it's really the first thing we need to do. Because if we want to make it easier to build housing, if there's nowhere to legally build it, then we can't do it. And so updating zoning is trying to legalize building housing in more places. So let's move on and talk a bit more about what this zoning reform does. And so again, when we rezone an area, we're changing the rules for what you can build there. And so what this law is doing is it's asking towns to determine a few areas where it will become legal for current landowners to build multifamily housing up to 15 units per acre. And we're going to go over what that actually looks like in practice. Again, it doesn't force landowners to change existing land uses. So if you own a gas station and it gets rezoned to allow multifamily housing as well in what's called an overlay district, you can keep it as a gas station, you don't have to sell it, you don't have to change the land use, but now, if you choose to do so, you have the option to maybe build a couple condos on that property as well. And last but not least, to ask communities across the state to do this at once. So this is a statewide issue. Again, we haven't been building across the whole state. It's not just Norden, it's not just another town. So if we're going to solve this issue at the state level, we need a kind of coordinated effort across the state to reform zoning. And zoning is municipal policy, but it's a statewide issue, and that's why we're having the state ask communities across the region to go through this process all at once, which is why I'm at a lot of public meetings right now. So moving on. And just one last illustration of this, I want to talk about what zoning capacity looks like, because again, we're trying to create capacity for new housing, we're not creating new housing. And so, say we have a piece of property, the zoning used to be for maybe a single family house, we say now you can build 4 units there if you choose to. You can see on the left, if you have 2 units there right now, we've now upzoned it to 4. You can keep it as 2, you still qualify. If it's a vacant lot, and we say you can build 4 units there, if you don't build anything, it's fine. There's no need to do so, you're still in compliance with the law as long as it's legally possible to build 4 units there. And the same thing, if the lot is filled out with 4 and you zone it for 4, you're in compliance with the law. So zoning is what you're allowed to build, it's not what you have to build. So going on, what the law is doing is asking towns to legalize multifamily housing at a density of 15 units per acre. And the reason for that number is we're trying to incentivize a certain kind of housing. We're trying to incentivize this type of housing that is pretty scarce in Massachusetts right now, and that's called missing middle housing, so-called because it's largely missing. We don't have a lot of it, and it's mid-size. So it's everything that falls between a single-family home and a mid-rise apartment building. So everything from duplexes, classic New England triple-deckers, cottage courts, you often see a lot of cottages in the same lot, small apartment buildings, all of these kind of different housing types are missing middle, and we don't have a lot of them. So what does that look like? Let's go on to the next one. So who is this for? I should highlight that as well. So this is, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about who this law is trying to target, who is this trying to create homes for. Missing middle housing is trying to target people with incomes that are too high to qualify for subsidized housing, but too low to afford a single family home, which, as I said earlier, median sale price is $550,000 in Norden, which means you need a $128,000 income to afford it. The way subsidized housing works is to qualify in most towns, you need to make less than 80% of the area median income, which in this region is about $73,000. So if your income falls between $73,000 and $128,000, you can't afford a single family home, and you don't qualify for subsidized housing, then you are kind of out of luck, right? You can't find a housing option. You're renting or buying in the private market, but you can't afford a single family home. This is trying to create options for those people. Smaller, like naturally more affordable homes that are these kind of missing middle housing types. Now, what does that actually look like? Let's go on. A couple quick illustrations. Oh, maybe. There we go. But anyway, what I was saying in the last slide is, who is this for? People in the middle class, plain and simple. Like I talked about, like a teacher would be a classic person who might be able to afford this. Local first responders, small business owners, local employees, people that are solidly in the middle class, making between maybe $70,000 to $130,000 a year. That's what we're hoping to really target with this. And what does it look like? The way Norden is designing this is they're really working on trying to promote more small scale missing middle housing. So it could look like your classic New England triple deckers, 2-family homes. If you have small lots, that qualifies at 15 units per acre and is a possibility for this. And a few more examples in the next 2 slides we can go through quickly. If you have a larger lot, it could be a larger building like this where you have 10 units on a ½ acre, and then you're hitting like 20 units per acre, also meeting the goal of the law. But at a larger scale, this is an option as well, and I think some of your options you're looking at could maybe allow this, but I know that Paul is really trying to target, and the planning board are trying to target these smaller scale development opportunities.
Our draft language has the cap at 15, so both of these would be more dense than we would be allowing.
Great point, yeah. So the other 2 options are probably a little better. And as an even better option on the next slide, I want to show that this isn't out of line with what you have right now. You have housing at this density in Norden already. So I just pulled 2 examples, 140 Barrow Street, 3 units on a 1/5 of an acre, 14 units per acre, so almost gets you there, and then 378 Reservoir, you this 4-unit small building on a 1/4 acre, that gets you right to 50 units per acre. So that's a perfect example of what this kind of development could look like. Okay, now what you're all waiting for, I know. How is this going to affect municipal finances? This is really the big question. I know everyone wants to hear it, because at the end of the day, your wallet is what most people are worried about. So we don't have to guess anymore, because you're pretty late in the process. A lot of communities have already gone through this. At least 4 communities have commissioned fiscal impact analyses from private firms, potentially more that we're not aware of, but those are the 4 that we all know of. And all of them have found that this would have a positive impact on municipal finances. The way that's worked is they've compared projected costs with projected revenues coming in from new housing. So they're looking at municipal staffing, public school costs, police and fire costs, costs in other departments, and then comparing that to the property taxes and vehicle excise taxes you're getting from new residents. And all of them have found that the fiscal impact is not only positive, but would increase the scale of development. So in scenarios where more gets built, the fiscal impact is better than in scenarios where less gets built. Again, Mansfield, Medfield, Milton, and West Newbury have all gone through these analyses. And I want to take a look at what one of those looked like in your neighbor Mansfield on the next one. So Mansfield did this analysis, and they looked at 3 scenarios. One in which there was by right development, one in which there is they were emphasizing mixed-use development, and the 3rd scenario is where they had by right development and they were permitting additional housing through special permits. And what they found is that obviously revenues go up with more development, more people move into town, more property taxes, brand new properties tend to be very valuable. That brings a lot of tax revenue in. And in all 3 cases, the more that got built, the more positive that revenue balance would be when comparing what the education and town service costs would look like. And I know this is a big question, and I think this is a brief coverage of it. One thing I'll point you to later, this is probably more for the boards, is that the Massachusetts Taxpayers Foundation has done a pretty in-depth statewide study on this. They recorded a presentation on it that I think is really excellent. So for more detail, maybe Paul can share that out with you, because I think that really gets into the nuts and bolts of all this.
May I ask a question?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt. How many units is this based on?
Yeah, so I wish I had the whole study with me. They're projecting Mansfield similar. I picked this one because Mansfield has a pretty similar population as you all. So I think your required minimum is 750, so Mansfield maybe 800 to 1,000 or so.
Okay, so the projections are for the max.
That would be if everything got built, which again, isn't probably a totally realistic scenario. They're looking a little beyond what would actually get built, but they're trying to look at like, okay, say this actually did all get built, what would the impact be? And this is what they found. Realistically, every town's gonna be a little different. It depends where you rezone, how much is actually gonna get built, right? If you're rezoning over a totally undeveloped plot of land, someone's probably gonna build there. If you're rezoning over a very profitable grocery store or gas station, probably not. So,
Okay, thank you.
okay, and let's, there might be more questions about this, but
I
I
have
can.
a list of questions, but I was gonna let you finish.
Sorry,
All right.
I didn't mean to throw you off.
No worries, I can get to the end of this.
I'm
and
gonna
then we
let
can-
you finish and just write them down.
Perfect, yeah. Let's look at one slide from that Taxpayers Foundation presentation right now. Because I think this is the key kind of misconception of growth that we need to move past, which is the idea that growth is bad for town fiscal health. And the data says that's just simply not true. Massachusetts Taxpayers Foundation looked at communities across the state based on how their property tax per capita changed and their population. And they found that communities with population loss saw the highest property tax increase. And that's coming from the Massachusetts Taxpayers Foundation, not me. So the data's out there, right? And they're seeing that taxes grew the most in towns with population loss, and they grew less in communities that saw some growth. Communities with the most growth saw a little bit more than those with 5 to 10% growth, but overall what we're seeing is that if your population is declining, you're having fewer people pay for a similar amount of services, and you're seeing your taxes per person go up. It's pretty simple math there. And so if you want to keep your services going at the level they are right now, you do need to see some kind of growth in order to sustain that moving forward. So I want to move on to school impacts, and we can go more into this at the end perhaps. So how would this impact school enrollment? This is the study that I find really surprises people, but the fact is that multifamily development tends to have a pretty limited impact on school enrollment. So MEPC, the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, did a study of all the towns in their region and how their housing development compared with school enrollment. And they found that there's actually no strong correlation there. The graph up there shows the correlation between school enrollment on the vertical axis and housing units on the horizontal axis, and you see that there's actually no clear trend. And that's really surprising, I think, for many people, but the reason for that is that multifamily housing just does not tend to be a very attractive option for families with children. This law says that you can't bar families for children, you can't have your housing be age restricted, but multifamily housing, you're much often getting 1-bedroom apartment, 2-bedroom apartments. That's likely to attract young couples, first-time homeowners, maybe kids moving back from college or graduating high school, older folks who are moving out of their big single-family homes and downsizing. None of these groups are particularly likely to have kids. If you have kids, you're more likely to seek a single-family home. And so what drives school enrollment tends to be the turnover in single-family homes rather than building newer condos or apartments. That's the trend we're seeing across the state. So I do want to move on to the next one as well, because I think so many towns have this concern that if they allow new housing, they're going to see their schools overcrowded. And that one doesn't tend to really square with the data in most towns, because almost everywhere in Massachusetts we're seeing declining school enrollment. And in Norton, you can see that school enrollment peaked around the mid-2000s and has had been on a pretty steady decline ever since. So these fears about overcrowded schools just aren't really squaring with the data right now. So yeah, if there's concerns about school overcrowding, that's really not one concern, I think, is borne out of the data at the moment. And let's move on to the last one. Finally, the question I get all the time is, how is this going to impact our sewer and water responsibilities? Folks tend to think if we're allowing property owners to build new housing, is the town going to be on the hook for building sewer and water for that, especially in towns like Norton that don't have public water and sewer everywhere? And the answer is that this law does not obligate towns to provide sewer and water for any new development. So if a property owner who's not on public water and sewer decides they want to build multifamily housing on that property, it's their responsibility to pay for either any sewer connections or for a private septic system on that property. All right, that about wraps up my common concerns presentation, and I'll turn it back to Paul or Tim, or we can do questions now, whatever's.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's the end of kind of your slides. Will, if there are any direct questions on the data presented from members of FinCom or Select Board, please let us know. I think one of the questions that I had is if the Mansfield study is public.
Yeah, it's public. Yeah, and I can share it with you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Just a statement first. I just want to say I appreciate that you say you're not from the state, but you used the phrase "we" a lot when you were talking about this.
Okay. I do not work for the government of Massachusetts, so be clear on that.
I'm just making an observation. And I like the way that you said that the state wants to let the towns decide where to put it, but not whether they want it or not.
Okay.
And so when you were looking at the Mansfield case, and Mansfield has their own electric company, and they have a much higher income bracket as well. I'm curious how that relates to the town of Norton as well.
Yeah, I mean, every town's a little different, obviously, right? Like, what's true for Norton will not be exactly true for Norton. What's true for Mansfield will not be exactly true for Norton. That said, Mansfield is not the only community that's done this. Milton, West Newbury, Medfield have all done these similar studies. They've commissioned private firms to look at the projected economic impact, and they've all come to very similar conclusions. I can't say there's no chance Norton would be different, but I don't see a clear reason why Norton would see some different data than these other towns have seen so far.
Thank you.
This is more of a statement than a question too. You know, overcrowding of schools is different than increased student population, which would cost quite a bit. Our average is what, 17,000 plus per student? Somebody give me a thumbs up? Okay. Higher than that? Okay. So that's just something to consider.
With fixed costs, so it's a higher number,
No, go ahead.
higher number when it comes to insurance and all those items.
Right, so that was
So
my
it's about
point.
18.
So, I mean, any increase is gonna cost and impact the budget, no matter what, so, I just wanted to put that out there as my statement, so.
Just a note for the room, if you're not speaking into a microphone, I think the people on Zoom will have trouble hearing you, so.
But you'd also be increasing revenue because you'd be getting more taxes. So if we're just gonna look at one side of the ledger, we can just, we can make any argument we can, right? Because I could say, well, we're gonna get $8 million more in taxes, but we're not gonna have any more increased costs. Well, it doesn't work that way. There's both sides. So you get more revenue, and you might, even though this says that increasing student numbers and enrollment wouldn't be that impactful from the evidence.
Correct, there will be more revenue, but we'll leave it for FinCom to look at the revenue versus the expenses and the costs. I don't believe that it's gonna be a net gain for the town.
I'll make a
And,
comment.
and that's based on what, Steve?
The facts and previous,
Let's not get into a cross discussion here in terms of how we balance the budget here. I think you had a comment. Did you want to come up to a microphone and just so the people in the room can hear you and just, yeah.
I just wanted to
Point out at the bottom of the slide with the study said net, not revenue. It said net fiscal impact, which includes both sides. And it was a positive number for the record.
thank you.
Okay. Additional questions for Will? I know we have some additional slides after this talking about the districts and different things like that the planning board's been looking at, so.
So, Mr. Will, your organization is basically trying to drive down housing costs, correct?
Right.
So what does your organization have to say to the hundreds, if not thousands, of residents of Norton who may have purchased a house in the last 5-10 years, have spent $1 million, 800,000, and now, let's say this all works, and all your data is correct, and it drives down the cost of housing, and I'm sitting here with $1 million mortgage, and now my house is worth 600,000. What do you say to those residents that are living in town, that are now upside down, that kind of money?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that I can answer that by asking us to manage our expectations here. The projection we have is that it would take building 220,000 new homes by 2035 to stabilize housing costs where they currently are. And that is a tall order. If every home, the projections for how many homes will be created through this law is 40,000 homes, right? So this is a small part of getting us to that number we need just to stabilize housing costs where they are right now. So the idea that building new homes can actually cause housing costs to go down, it's, I think we need housing to be more affordable, but the idea that housing prices are actually going to go down is probably not in our immediate future. Our best case is we're going to see stabilization in housing costs, or at least seeing this exponential rise slow down. So that's my answer. We're not trying to drive anyone underwater. I mean, when I say we, this is my opinion right now, right? But there's no expectation of housing costs going down as a result of this. There's a hope that the rise will slow down, and realistically, if we can just get to stable, that would be a really great outcome.
I do see one member of the public trying to come to the podium here. If you just want to state your name and address for the record, please, sir.
My name is Howard Wensley, 3 Flint Lane, Norton. I just want to confirm with Will that the we you were talking about was CHAPA and not the state administration, because it was kind of inferred that you were implying the state wants to do this and the state is pushing for this, but your comments today endorsing what is going on was from CHAPA and not necessarily the state.
Yeah, I'll be clear. I do not represent the state. CHAPA is a private nonprofit. We try to support policies that will make housing more affordable. We do believe this is one of those policies, and maybe I'm mixing up my we's and my I's. So sorry about that. I have not been using those specific languages, but no, to be clear, I in no means represent the state at all.
Thank you.
The question,
Yes, Mr. Turgeon, I saw you were trying to find the react function there, so please, if you state your name and address for the record, please.
thank you. First of all, Will, thank you too for the presentation. I found it helpful. Maybe I was one of the last ones to be aware of this issue. It seems like a couple of people are asking questions about what CHAPA is or if it's state. According to your 990, your tax form, it looks like, Will, all of the grant revenue from CHAPA comes from the state. So I understand you're a separate not-for-profit, but in fact, you're paid for by the state. Is that correct?
Some of our funding is from the state. I don't know the exact breakdown. A lot of it's from private foundations.
I can share it. It's actually,
Sure.
it's online.
No, it's all public records, so that's not something that we need to. I think Mr. Radigan has been very clear. He's from a nonprofit that promotes housing affordability in the state. He is certainly not.
I understood that. I just
Yeah.
wanted to make the point that it is state funded. It is all coming from the state, and people can look at the tax returns.
Thank you for your comment, sir. Okay. Any additional comments here? Yep, Mr. Sweeney, if you want to just come to the microphone and just state your name and address for the record, please, even though I've heard it before.
Mark Sweeney, 14 Laurel Lane. Is his name Turgeon?
The gentleman's last name is Turgeon. That's just spoke as Turgeon, yes. I believe he's from Red Mill Village.
So he's basically telling you that this gentleman is paid by the state. He's funded a 503C, but it's funded per the gentleman, Mr. Turgeon, by the state. So indirectly, you can't, he's working for the state. It's funded by the state. You have somebody here from the state that's pushing this.
Mr. Sweeney?
So I haven't finished yet, Tim, thank you. So you're basically, your first person up here for, what's CHAPA stand for?
That's the Citizen Housing and Planning Association.
Citizens Housing and Planning Association. So the first person you have up here, I just want to make sure that everyone knows that it's not just somebody over there doing well, you know, a do-gooder type of thing. It's funded by the state. So you've almost got the first person up here speaking for the state for this effort. Just want to make sure everyone knows where we're coming from, or where he's coming from. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. I'll just say that I'm under no illusions of the efforts that Mr. Radigan is trying to put forward and the TRAP is trying to put forward. I also know that the data he's presented is all public record and everybody can look at the data and make their own determinations and determine how they'd like to view everything that has been said tonight from him or any other speaker. Thank you. I just see one other hand raised in the meeting, in the Zoom meeting. Ms. Brodsky, if you could just state your name and address for the record, please. I'll just give you a second. If you're currently muted if you're speaking, so I'm sorry if you, there you go.
Okay, yeah, Tamara Brodsky, 15 Willis Drive in Morton, thank you. So my question for the speaker is, the way it's being kind of proposed is how gratuitous this would be for, like, you know, a fireman, a teacher, a small shop owner. They are exactly the demographic target audience of the potential properties that could be built in this overlay area if it were to be zoned that way. I'm not quite sure how it is that you could determine now what would be built there. Like, maybe I'm missing something. But so the zoning overlay allows for, you know, something other than single-family homes, maybe duplexes, maybe apartment buildings. But who is it that's going to determine the cost of those? Who is it that's going to say, this is $3,000 a month, or this is $1,000 a month, or this is for sale, you know, as a condo, and it's $500,000 or $750,000. I would imagine that whoever develops that land, potentially, will be the arbiter of how much it is going to charge for those apartments, or, you know, whatever type of dwellings they are. So the way you're phrasing it in your conversation to us makes it sound as though this is, you know, someone who makes $80,000 a year and they just can't afford a $700,000 mortgage, and, you know, this is perfect for them. But how can you say that? How do you know what someone will then charge down the road? And that is my question.
Yeah, that's a great question. Really important, I think, thing to understand about this law is that the person who determines how much any housing built under this law costs is the person who owns it, right? So whoever builds it either going to sell units as condos, or they're going to sell homes as apartments, or they're going to rent them as apartments. So it is, you know, a free market policy. It's not subsidizing housing. What's really important, though, is that we know that it's much more expensive to build a single-family home, to acquire that land and build a single-family home, than it is to acquire land and build multiple homes, whether apartments, condos, triple-decker, duplex on it. And so right now, if there's new housing being built under the current zoning, all it can be is single-family homes. And that is always, a new single-family home will always be more expensive than a new condo or a new, I shouldn't say always, 95% of the time will be more expensive than a new condo, than a unit in a triple-decker, a duplex, right? And so, again, we're trying to create options that are between single-family homes and subsidized housing. We don't know exactly how much it'll sell or rent for, but it should be cheaper than a single-family home, and you'll be able to buy it without having to have an income low enough to qualify for affordable housing. And that's trying to target people in the middle. We can't say exactly how much it'll cost till it gets built, but it is targeting that middle-class population. And the other thing to say is that it's not just about these particular homes being built, right? we're talking about supply and demand. When we have a limited supply of homes, we see prices go up across the state. And so the goal here is by building more homes, not only will these missing middle homes hopefully be more affordable than single family homes, but they'll also take some of the pressure off the housing market, so that some of the older homes that are getting really high prices right now will have a little pressure taken off of them, so hopefully their prices will continue to rise quite as quickly in the future.
Thank you. Our next slide is going into the districts here, if we have any more comments. Yep. Oh, I asked all the boards, but.
No, you
were waiting
did
to-
specify in the financial.
Oh, okay, sorry.
And as I said, I had listed my request with the full page. But
Go ahead, Bob.
Thank you. Matt's making a very good point on a number of issues here. The one thing I want to remind everyone in this room is the MBTA, another non-funded program that they're coming up with, is just another example of what we already have. We have 40B. Chapter 40B is a comprehensive permitting process that the town has been involved in for over 30 years. Every city and town in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, 351 communities, is required to build 10% or more affordable housing. Basically the same concept as this MBTA overlay. The town of Norton has reached a 10% goal, so now we're looking at another unfunded mandate on top of the comprehensive permit process, which means that we have to not only comply with the 10%, but now we have to do the MBTA overlay. An example was made about a school teacher making $48,000 a year. If you go down to Mansfield Ave, our last 40B that we built here in Norton, the rentals in that building are between $2,100 and $3,900 a month. A school teacher cannot afford that. 2 street teachers living together might be able to afford it. So it's an example of how the state continues to push the stuff on us, unfunded mandates. The infrastructure in Mansfield, as an example that Matt made, I'm sad to say, is probably in a much better shape than ours is. Their commercial tax base is much better than ours. But on top of that, their water issues are non-existent. We have sewer capacity, there's no question about that. We have plenty of that. But I just want to stress the fact that I looked it up today. 351 communities were required to follow comprehensive permitting chapter 40B. We are there. 177 communities have been forced to do this now. And of the 177 communities being forced, Norton is one of 3 dozen that are in compliance with chapter 40B. This is, to me, the same thing as 40B under a different label. I looked up the state 351 communities and towns, cities and towns. 57 are in compliance with chapter 40B, Norton being one of them. We're being forced to do additional housing, and they can talk about all they want about affordable. It's not affordable. That school teacher that was just brought up could not afford our new affordable units we have in Norton. It's just not possible. I just want to bring that up as an example.
Thank you. Before you come up, Orin, I was just going to say, Rob had mentioned that he had a couple of questions from the planning board, so if you wanted to just ask those, I'm not sure if they're things that I can answer or things that Mr. Redding can answer.
Want to go?
Sure.
First of all,
Something that,
The wonders of technology.
Well, the bendy post is the hard part. So something you said that jumped out at me, you mentioned that how a lot of people in Norton had owned their houses for a long time, and that they were the ones that were going to be hurt more by the increases in the housing costs and everything. I was curious how that worked.
Sorry, no, I meant the opposite, right? If you live
say
here,
that. You said it would hit the people in the house a long time harder.
No, so what yeah, I don't think I meant to say that, at least. What I mean is that if you've been in your home for a while, you're probably doing okay right now because you're probably able to buy it at a much cheaper price. But if you're trying to buy a home right now or rent, you're in a very tight
Person
spot.
trying to buy now, yeah.
Yeah.
You were talking about,
Mike Rob.
oh, it's still not picking me up? Sorry. Sorry, I'm trying to look at my paper at the same time. So you were talking about the state population, and you said it decreased?
Yeah, so 2022 and 23 decreased.
And the year after?
Let me go back to the slide. It's been
Slide
it's
13,
been decreased,
Paul.
and then we had 1 year where it went up by a little bit again. So I have to remember. Make sure I'm getting my stats right.
Paul, it's slide 13.
There we go. Yeah, so 2023.
But our net, we've had actually a big increase in our population, and that's why there's a housing tightness, right?
No, that's not correct. No.
We have not. Then we are fine and we don't need to do this?
No. So I think this is a subject that trips people up a lot. Is like if our population isn't growing that rapidly, why do we have a housing crisis? And it's really about households, right? Back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, we had a lot of large families in Massachusetts. We had 2 parents and 4 kids living in a lot of homes. Now those kids have grown up. They're all looking for their own homes. Fewer of them are getting married. Fewer of them are having kids. So that same home that had 6 people in it now has 2 people in it, and those 6 people are now in 5 different homes. And that's kind of how we're getting to this situation where we're not seeing our population rise very quickly, but we're seeing demand for housing really go up.
Let me just read to you something, and I'm looking this up. This is fact. Massachusetts experienced its largest population increase in 60 years between 2023 and 24.
It was the only time it increased.
Growing by 69,703 people, or just under 1%, to a record high 7 million. So you might want to check the facts on the internet on that.
I'm confident in my facts. But thank you.
And so is the internet. So is
my data is cited right below the image
we're
there.
on the government's. I'm checking the.
So this is a report from Boston Indicators. It's cited at the bottom of that chart. It goes over all our population trends over the last decade or so. So I encourage you to look at that.
Okay, this just mass populate. I guess they're not reliable. The plan for cost. You're implying this isn't going to cost towns money, and we feel like it is going to burden us with money. You did talk a lot about, you're trying to imply that we're mistaken, that it's going to add increases and things, but the data actually says it does, and there is a reason why all the towns are looking at this as an unfunded mandate. It's going to cost them money too. Everybody is saying it's going to cost money, so I'm curious in your explanation how this isn't going to create an additional financial burden for Norton.
Yeah, the answer is that it'll cost money, but it'll bring in revenue as well, right?
But not as much. That's why it's a net loss.
Well, no. The studies that have been done so far show that multifamily housing development tends to bring in more revenue than it imposes costs on towns, largely because people living in multifamily housing tend to have fewer children, and therefore you're seeing people contribute to the tax base and not have as many costs associated as families with children.
Yes, but with that density, if you add up the weight on services and and then you figure out what the net is, it's a burden for the town. We've done that math ourselves. A number of towns have. That's why they're calling it an unfunded mandate. It costs them money.
So all I know is that the towns that actually have commissioned economic impact analyses have found it to be positive. That's the data I have to share, and I don't have anything more.
Okay, and then the other towns found otherwise.
And Paul said that, Paul, you can send out the Mansfield report, right? So,
Yes. Rob, can I, just as an example, I have one end of it, but not the other, but 274 East Main Street, right, there's 180 units there. That's actually one of our top 10 taxpayers, over $500,000 last year. What I don't know is how much the town has spent in services, but we know that there was, there are currently about 20-some students there. They also contribute, they're on, well, I don't know if they're on the town sewer line, but over $500,000 is coming in from that one development, which I guess it would be a lot of town services to overcome that $500,000.
yeah, we can all go back to the reports and the data and make our own evaluations.
Some of the towns feel it is, some feel it's an unfunded mandate. You don't agree with that. Was there a bill passed in Massachusetts to help people buy homes as well?
There are a number of down payment assistance
And
programs.
things, the first generation home buyers, things like that?
Yeah, there are a number of those programs.
Okay.
I used one, yeah.
Well, in fact, last year, the state, I think, provided up to almost $1 billion in housing, various types of housing.
So in other words, the state will give people money to help them buy these houses
Or build.
after. Is there any bill to help providing assistance? Does the state have any interest to help people, the towns, with expenses?
Yeah, so there have been $7.8 million in grant funds so far given to towns for drawing up these rezoning plans. There's still money on the table, so if you want to seek more grant funding, talk to Paul,
Not
and
for
you can
doing
seek that.
the plans, but if this did require financial burden to Norton, if we were getting money from the state to offset that.
So there's a $15 million grant program that's providing towns with infrastructure upgrade funding for housing development projects. That said, that's to incentivize compliance with the law, but the state nor nor anyone that has done a economic impact analysis of this expects it to have costs that outweigh the revenues it would bring in.
And Rob, just so you know, the state passed what they call a catalyst fund for communities that are compliant. And then 2 years ago, they added a public works project or fund called Housing Works, which is to help offset costs for water and sewer to help fund housing developments.
For this meeting, I'm going to hold a yes, the state is going to provide some money to help it.
Well, I would say makes us eligible. I don't know that we automatically get it. We would have to apply for it.
Fair enough.
Just closer to the micro.
You were showing pictures of what it looks like. I gotta be honest, when we were in here talking about what these units would look like and going through our codification, our zoning language and all that, it was nothing like that. I'm just saying that the examples you gave were very different from what we've looked at here.
So those are all examples of what 15 units per acre can look like. You could certainly build in other architectural styles, but that's roughly the scale that we're looking at.
And then, yeah, you said this is a positive financial impact. Do you have math you can give? It was really, you kept, when he was asking and others, you kept saying, well, I think so. But
No, I have all the math, yeah.
Okay.
So I can share the Mansfield Economic Impact Study, I can share this.
Do you have it on Norton? As Roger was pointing out,
So you-
Mansfield's a very different town, the math isn't gonna
So
be the same.
Mansfield hired a consulting firm to do this pretty in-depth analysis of all their revenue sources, all of their costs, and projecting how that would change with new housing. So it's a major undertaking that Mansfield paid for.
Okay.
So I can't just produce that out of the
Okay, so we don't have it on.
my back pocket.
But
yeah.
we just don't think so, got it. That must be. MBTA wording asked for family suitable, and yet you keep saying there won't be that many kids and all. Family suitable kind of applies, we're looking for kids.
Well, good point. So what the law says is you can't have age restrictions on these units, which means you can't make them only for people 55 plus.
Right.
It has to be that anyone of any age
Yeah,
can.
you have to allow kids.
Yeah, of course you have to allow kids, right? It'd be a violation of the Fair Housing Act to not allow kids.
But you
Like,
said
we all
that
love
you
kids.
didn't think we'd get a lot of kids, but,
Well, yes, the reality is that families tend to be less attracted to 1 and 2 bedroom apartments than they are to single family homes. And so other larger multifamily projects tend to have fewer kids than single family homes do.
the law is saying family suitable though. Like these, units built to accommodate families, so I feel a mixed message in what you're saying versus.
Ultimately, it's up to the developer what they're gonna build.
Yeah, that's right. So you can't stop someone from building
We'll move
as many
on.
bedrooms as
We
they
can
want
move
to.
on. Because I want to watch time here.
Sure.
You say that we're mistaken that this would cost more in our schools? You said it was false?
In terms of your school costs, I can't say for sure, every town is different. The idea that it would overcrowd your schools, your superintendent's here and perhaps she can weigh in on this, but you're seeing declining enrollment, so overcrowding seems fairly unlikely.
We weren't talking about overcrowding, we're just talking about increases. We're very against the wall on our budgets. We have certain things that we're against the wall and we're not in a position to take on additional strain. school budget is certainly one of them. We're cutting it in ways, I'm one of the people who voted for the override that we didn't get, and we're making cuts now that we wouldn't have wanted to make already. And so if we place more load on the schools, of course, they're feeling that more.
And you already gave a version of this presentation to our school committee previously, so they already have this information and data as well.
And sewer and water, what would be the impact on sewer and water? You said it doesn't require them to build out the capacity for sewer and water, but I'll tell you, if you do it in Norton, physics is going to make you do it.
So, no, you, the town of Norton, are not required to pay for any sewer and water
Not by
connections.
law, I understand.
Yes.
Okay.
That means if a developer is building in a place without public water and sewer, they're responsible for paying for those connections or for that private septic system.
Yeah, one of the things that we've gone back and that's been a debate is zones that either do or do not have access to sewer and whether they accept more or less attractive to potential redevelopment. So that's one of the pieces that we've looked at as part of our site selection process.
Correct, but the other half of that is water, and our water system is in dire straits already, so.
It's challenged, yes.
Dire straits, Tim, let's be straight.
Understatement of the night.
Yeah. Okay. So that was my last one. I just, our water system does not have capacity for us to take on additional load. This is a town-wide problem. This is not like a developer can patch something in this area or put in a new pipe. So it's a town-wide thing. What would there be if Norton took this on and we did have to upgrade our actual town water supply system because we really are maxed out? What money is there for that?
Yeah, so on that one, I mean, there is, again, state grant funding available for infrastructure upgrades that you can apply for. I wouldn't say I'm an expert in public water and sewer policy, though, so I can't get too much into that.
Okay, so, but there's no plan for that that you can specify right now?
I think that would be a question for you all, not for me.
Okay, I'm gonna stop there.
I'll turn this way. Additional questions for Will? Or did we want to get into, I see Oren, you're up there. I was going to get into parcel selection next. If you want to go and ask a question, please do.
Warren Siegel, 28 Cotty Road. I just wanted to make this conversation a little real. I think Paul started to get there. One of the properties you identified was East Main Street. And the reason you identified it, because you thought it was a recently built property, well built. It consists of 3-story buildings, mostly 3-story buildings, except the front 3 buildings are 2-story buildings. Has 188 units with 29 students. What does that represent? That's basically 15.42%. So you're not talking about 750 units. If you apply that to everything you're looking at, it's only 15.42%. If you let me finish, Rob, then I'll get back to you.
I have a question, what you just said,
Okay.
what you're addressing.
The real estate taxes that they pay.
Oren, if you can get closer to the microphone,
I'm sorry,
please.
the real estate taxes they pay are $589,000 divided by 29, come to $20,310. It's my understanding, even use the 18,000, we get 5,000 back from the state, which makes it $13,000. So if you're looking at the type of project he's been talking about, this is really consistent with it. It's showing how many children are going to be occupying these properties. This is 188 units. And this is basically typical of what you could see people putting up there. They have need for amenities. They have amenities. They're well developed and they're well occupied as far as I know.
Okay.
And they're paying large taxes. In addition, basically for facts, the schools from 2014 to 2024 declined 223 students. From 2004 to 2024, 836 students. Town population from 2019 to 2023 declined to 802. So I'm just trying to, what he's saying is, we're saying, where's this coming from and how's it applicable? Just looking at our own property and our own town and its students and its population, they're all consistent with what he's talking about. So to dismiss it as, well, they're funded by the state, it shouldn't have any bearing, it's ridiculous. it really has some sense and it really makes sense because what you can see in these properties as they're being developed, they're really, what's happening, they're being attracted by young people without a lot of children. And to disregard that and just say, well, it's made up, doesn't face reality.
We're not gonna get into.
To be fair to him, because I think he was more commenting on comments I've made in a previous meeting than his presentation. So I just want to, sorry if that seemed mysterious to you.
You were saying his didn't apply to this town. And I'm giving you some real facts to show how they in fact replicate what this town is actually going through. And I think it needs to be understood. Thank you.
Val, did you want to go or? Okay.
Yep. Val Cabral, 50 Mansfield Avenue. I'm having deja vu here. 40B is a state statute that requires towns to approve affordable housing developments under flexible rules if at least 20 to 25% of the units have long-term affordability restrictions. The $2,100 starting point for Norton Links, which I told you the last time you said this, Bob, is for the non-affordable units. When we talk about affordable housing, it does not mean that every single unit in the building is affordable. Frankly, I kind of wish it did, but everyone seems to hate 40B. We need to understand that when we're talking about 40B and affordability and new properties and what they're going to charge, Norton Links retail rates for apartments are not what you need to be comparing with if you're thinking about affordability. You need to look at the affordable unit prices, which are a few $100s less per unit at least, which are still frankly really expensive. I don't disagree. But correct, that's still high, they're still higher than $1,200. But when you say $2,100, that is not the affordable rate, and you are not giving folks facts when they are expecting you to. That's not how 40B works.
All right. We don't want to get into cross-examination, different people talking here. Understand. Thank you for your comments. Bridget, did you want to speak or did you? Okay.
Yeah. Just real quick, it was kind of off of that because it was
Name and
Bridget
address.
Carr, Oak Street, sorry. It was off of the 40B comment as well, but it was more, I guess, I was going to phrase it as a question. 40B is vastly different from MBTA, correct? Because 40B, you pretty much, the state comes in and says, we're putting this here, here it is, yay. With the, listen, I've spoke to my dislike on this bill, but I've also spoken in favor of compliance as well on the record, so I'm continuing with that. At least with this, we do have choices. It would have to go through a site plan review through the planning board, if I'm not mistaken. So just to say that 40B and 3A are the same is I don't think correct, if someone can answer that.
I would say that they are not the same. There are nuances involved. We would have a site plan review process for any of these projects, but it would not be a special permit. Site plan review processes, generally, unless there's no way to square it with the zoning, we can put conditions on it. We can't deny it.
Yeah. No.
So there's definite differences in how the processes go forward. 40Bs also generally come with a project in hand. This overlay provides the opportunity to build things that would then go through all of those processes. There's nothing proposed until anything is there.
Right.
So there could be no net change, there could be significant net change, we don't know.
Right, okay, thank you.
So anything else before I get to maps, Roger?
Just as a question for Paul. Paul, all of these units, even if they're net units on top of the overlay district, all those units count against our numbers for 40B?
No. No, the numbers that we propose, Paul, you can confirm if I'm not, nothing that we put as capacity under MBTA counts against our 40B ratios.
No, only anything that gets built.
No, that's what I'm saying. So all these units that, if say they get built, all those units,
If they get built,
units
yeah.
would count against our 40B number.
Well,
They would, but
yes.
the language that we have for this, it also would require an affordability element to up to 10%, which is the maximum the state will require for this overlay.
Okay, thank you.
So basically, the goal with the language that we've put in along with this article is to, at worst, make no net change in our affordability ratio. The state said you can't make it all affordable or 25% or anything like that to juice your ratio, but they'll allow up to 10%. Okay. So Paul, I think we're on to, yep, there we go. So let's look at Norton. Let's go away from the state and all of the math. I was in, I'm in marketing, I don't like math. So the MBTA overlay is an overlay district, meaning a property owner can choose either the base zoning or meet the requirements of the overlay. They get to pick one set of rules or the other. They don't get to mix and match which rules they like from each. They can pick one set or the other set. So if there's a commercial property, they can build under commercial zoning. If there's a if it's a single family underlying zoning, they can build under the single family. They can build under the overlay. They can do either one. The approval would be by site plan, and again, not special permit. And just to be very, very, very clear, it is not the vacant TPC parcel that was presented at Fall Town Meeting last year. We'll get into what was noticed for this bylaw in the coming slides. The planning board is still revising the bylaw text, just for the boards to be aware, and the parcels to be selected, and I'll go through that. Multifamily, according to Norton's bylaw, starts at 3 attached units, so anything above a duplex is multifamily. And the zoning text and the parcels, from a procedural standpoint, will be one warrant article at town meeting, which means you won't get point of orders about people speaking about the wrong article again. So let's move ahead here, Paul. And in terms of the process, following town meeting, the planning board underwent an extensive public comment process, which continues, including having an open house event in this room in December, where we encouraged members of the public to place thoughts where they felt this project should be cited, along with comments they wanted to make, comments along the lines of, I don't want it at all. Those were received. The board members evaluated those selected properties, along with comments from town meeting and the process prior to that, under a number of criteria. And I think these are guiding principles of how we looked at that. We looked at areas where multifamily already exists, so it's not impacting as much the character of the neighborhood. Areas in need of redevelopment, areas where development might be challenging. This included just general reviews of the properties that are there. It also included reviews of parcel ownership. Are all of these parcels owned by one person? Are they owned by a bunch of different people? As well as land versus building value metrics. So we looked at a review of what is this piece of land worth? What is the building on it worth per our assessment guidelines? The guiding thought there is if you have I'll just say, a small fixer-upper on a beautiful piece of land, that would be a prime target to be redeveloped because there's no loss in bulldozing the old fixer-upper and putting something new on it. If you have a valuable property on the land, that makes it harder to justify the cost of purchasing it and building something new. And if feasible, one of the feedbacks that we got from our last process was if we're going to have the ability to do so, try to split any parcels or zones or portions of this overlay between the two elementary schools, so it's not all hitting JCS or the North School. And I'll just ask again, if anybody's on Zoom, can please mute your lines, that would be appreciated. So, again, please mute your lines if you're on Zoom, everybody can hear you, thank you. So, as part of this process ahead of town meeting, the planning board voted to notice 5 areas of town, which are circled here. We have the Mansfield Avenue North, Norton Glen, 138 Barrow Street, also known as the Tweed Mill property, Red Mill Village, and 274 East Main Street. And I'll go into each of those in a little bit of detail here. So, the Norton Glen, this is tied to the LG North School in terms of elementary alignment. These are existing affordable rental units, all of which are counted in our subsidized housing inventory. They have a contract with, I believe it's a state agency, Paul, through 2033 for those to be affordable units. So after 2033, we don't know what that would turn into. The average lot size is about 1 acre. It is under one property owner, so it would be potential one plan for redevelopment. And here's acreage. It's 25.2 acres with 150 existing units. If you took 25.2 acres and tried to bulldoze everything and build everything to the maximum capacity, you could, in theory, fit 343 units on this as a model on paper. that would be a net of 193. Again, just on paper, which I'll probably say too many times in the next 10 minutes. Moving on, Paul. Mansfield Ave. This is one of the properties that was part of our initial discussions last fall, but it was removed before a town meeting. This includes all the properties north of the TPC parcel, as well as some of the other properties on the north side, which includes some commercial buildings, along with all of the smaller quadplexes going on down towards the shopping center. All of these properties are currently zoned commercial, even though there's a lot of residential uses. So those existing apartments would potentially become conforming under the MBTA zoning overlay. This is made up of a lot of property owners with no unified plan of development, but there are sites that do have sewer on them. So again, less net impact on the scale here, and the split ownership we feel would make kind of a large scale redevelopment more challenging, as people have to buy them up one by one by one by one. Not to mention the fact that nobody's going to tear down the new electrical training warehouse that just went up there. And looking at this area, all of those together are 32.5 units. And if you build that out to the model, that would be 481. So these two areas combined would be over the amount that would be required for the Commonwealth requirement. If the planning board moved forward with this, I expect we would peel off a few of the lots and get as close to the minimum as we possibly could. Another property that's been one of the things that we noticed is the former Tweed Mill building on Barrow Street. This property is in, we'll just call it a mild state of disrepair, maybe to be generous. It's also near a lot of other duplex or similar multifamily properties around it. The site is empty, so any development on it would be net new. The dam on that property also needs repair. It is an existing residential zone. And Paul, I think there was discovered that there is an old sewer on the property, but nobody knows whether it's useful or not.
But it's an on-site system.
And it's 25 acres, just to, everybody's doing the math at home. And again, if we combined that with Norton Glen, again, that would be over the number there, same as it would be with Mansfield Ave. And those again are two different elementary schools. And as Mansfield Ave, again, all this math will be featured again in later presentations that you see. And then Red Mill Village and 274 East Main Street apartments, we have on one slide here. These would feed into the Norris Elementary School. It's commercial, residential R80 zoning. Red Mill Village itself, all of those properties combined allow for 51 acres. So in theory, Red Mill Village from an acreage standpoint would meet the requirements on its own. Again, there are existing units there, but that would model an increase of around 670 units. 274 East Main Street is a little less than 15 acres. As we mentioned, there's 188 existing units, and the model would only do 237 on that site, which would be a relatively small increase there. And you can see how those two would look if they're combined. So here are some potential combinations that the board expects to consider. Our official notice meeting, as I mentioned, will be next week on this. Some of the combinations here would meet the state requirement. Mansfield Ave and the Glen, Mansfield Ave and Tweed. You could also do the Glen and Tweed, or Red Mill Village. Red Mill Village has been discussed. There are a number of residents from Red Mill Village that are with us in person and on the Zoom call. Obviously, we'll hear from them, I think, either this evening or at our next meeting about how they feel about their property being discussed like this. The portion of the East Main parcels could be included in different proposals to meet requirements, but it's only 15 acres and the other properties that we noticed are 25, so it's kind of an odd fit to fit in with anything that we've noticed right now. But it is part of the parcel that we could include at town meeting. And then highlights of the bylaw text changes. There have been a lot of text changes since what you saw at town meeting. We have not voted on the bylaw language at this time. First, it meets the minimum requirements, affords affordable, and the potential for mixed-use properties. So the potential for commercial development on the ground floor. That would, in theory, increase commercial revenue and also reduce the amount of residential units which could be built on a site. Mixed-use development is only proposed on the first floor, because otherwise if you go above the first floor, then it starts taking away from the model and you need to build in more density to account for that. Paul, did I get that correct in the mechanics there?
Yes.
We've also capped everything at a maximum of 3 stories. The density bonuses, which were described at previous town meeting, have been removed entirely. And again, this bylaw is designed generally at promoting smaller scale buildings, some of what you saw on the slides today, rather than exclusively large buildings. There's nothing that says you can't build a larger multifamily building in the bylaws, but what it does do is it doesn't mandate a minimum building size of 90,000 square feet or something like that. It allows the developer, if they so choose, to build smaller properties. So that's what the bylaw text changes are, text is designed to do here. And then just the final one, the summary. The state requirements are looking for compliance from July 2025 with significant impacts on existing, future grants and discretionary funds. I mentioned that they put a rider in a fire safety equipment funding grant request saying that basically if you're not compliant, you're not eligible. Again, the overlay district was cited through a thorough public process. I think I'm sick of talking about this at this point. And again, going back to the beginning, the requirement is only to allow the opportunity to develop it. It doesn't mandate construction and doesn't prevent development under the existing zoning if the property owner wants. So if multifamily is developed, the requirements they lay out are designed to promote properties which we think are well designed and encourage mixed-use retail as well as affordable units, trying to keep Norton above that 10% threshold for affordability and kind of keep us above the state requirement for 40Bs to come in, which I think we've all seen recently is not something that's going to go away. So I do see a couple of hands raised in the Zoom meeting. I'll go to members of the select board or finance committees. Obviously, the planning board's seen a lot of this in the past few weeks. So.
Okay. Well, first I want to thank the planning board. I think you guys have done quite a bit of work on this. It's obvious, and I don't regret not being on the planning board at this time. I did. So just a couple quick things. The former Tweed building, and this is just my opinion, I'd love to see a business in there, and I don't think 400 units is a good idea for that area. I think the town kind of spoke very loudly that they were against this, and if we have to, rather than be against it, if we have to pass something, I think we pass something similar to what Foxborough did that's never going to be built or not going to be built for quite a while. So I would recommend the Red Mill Village alone. I've managed condos. I have a property management company. I've done it for 20 years, and in my entire career, I've seen one condo dissolve, and that was due to a disaster. So I don't think Red Mill is going anywhere. I don't think that it'll impact them at all, and that's my opinion. I did have one question on the recodification. Did you use anything?
The bylaw language, you mean?
Yeah, the bylaw language. Did you use anything that Mr. Who was it, Mr. Shabbat brought at town meeting?
A lot of his suggestions were to cut things out that we had initially had in there. Some of that, yes.
All right. I wish I had a copy of it because I could compare it. But.
Some of that is definitely incorporated. One of his proposals that he presented at town meeting was to make the minimum building size 90,000 square feet. And that's something that the board has in our discussion points for the 8th. Because that's basically how it was presented at town meeting, and I understood his logic. If you're going to have a developer come in here, you don't want to have them hamstrung by a small building next door or something with a large setback. But in general, I think the way that we was initially designed was to allow the potential for smaller buildings if that's what the developer wanted and what made sense for the area.
Okay.
So,
All right, yeah, and my final statement is, if the goal is to get this past the town meeting, I think the bare minimum, and on an area that's not gonna be developed in the near future or even, anytime soon, so, that's my thoughts. Anyone else?
Yeah, just really quick, I want to say thank you to the planning board and the chapter gentlemen who presented. You guys did a lot of thorough work. There's a lot of great information in here. I feel well informed on this article now. And I know that people are hung up on the issue that the state is requiring it, but I think if you put that aside, the fact that there's a need for housing in this specific area, it is not surprising. It shouldn't be surprising to anybody. I have people currently right now who are young couples or couples who have gone from double income to single income who cannot find housing in the area. They're having to move outside of Norton. So this shouldn't be shocking to anybody that there's a need for this housing. And aside from the fact that the state is requiring it, I do think that this is a good proposal. Thank you.
I think as I said at town meeting, I mean, regardless of whether housing is desired or wanted from the affordability standpoint, would this bylaw be in front of anybody if it wasn't a state requirement? I'm gonna say no, but here we are. One more comment from the member of the Finance Committee. I do see Mr. Schleicher on the Zoom call there.
Well, thank you very much. You kind of were in the fire, so thank you. Quick question. I saw on the tweet slide you had mentioned there's a Mass Military Support Foundation company that's
They're
potentially-
pursuing it, but that's been the case for at least a couple of years. I think under the existing zoning, it would be a challenge for them to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's not, is it an abandoned property that's an eyesore? Yes. Is it a fire hazard? Yes.
Brandon Noble.
Yeah. Is there somebody interested in it? Yes, but there's nothing firm on that at all.
Okay.
And that would be potentially a nonprofit, which would not be a tax revenue increase necessarily to the town, so.
Okay. Second question is, and I've heard different things, for the Red Mill area, is it true that each building is occupant owned?
So yes, I think I'm gonna just say that from there's governing documents around the property.
Yep.
The official notice meeting that all of the residents received notice for Red Mill Village is for our next meeting on the 8th. It was originally supposed to be last week, but the Sun Chronicle failed to publish the notice, which is why we're having to do this in the sequence we didn't want to. So I do want to be cognizant of the fact that they may or may not that we haven't gone through all of that with them in a forum, but there's individual ownership, but there's also restrictions and different things about how their board can go about it. I think that the initial feedback that we've gotten is that they're concerned that it could potentially detract from their property values if somebody sold and did something else that happened next door to them or something like that, which is similar to any other resident in town, but.
Okay, I just,
Let me, if I can chime in.
Sure.
If only there was somebody who managed condos here. They're individually owned units, but it's all percentages of a whole. So each unit is worth, such and such percent of that. So one person you couldn't have 10 units sell off and then have a building be built for that.
right, okay.
If that's what you were getting at.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it was the Norton Glen, you had said it's one owner, so that person decides, hey, I'm gonna sell, everyone's out of luck. I was just trying to understand with Red Mill, like I said, I had heard, so it's not like one person can sell and then build it. So it sounds like it would be a lot of,
The whole association would have to be dissolved, and that's why I made that comment that I've not seen that in 20 years of managing condos.
Okay, just, thank you, just getting a clarification.
Understood.
Thanks.
Yeah, I do have, Bob, I'm gonna ask you to hold on one second. Mr. Sliker, if you wanted just to speak from the Zoom meeting, I see your hand up there.
Thanks, Tim. Obviously, thank you to Paul and the planning board, for laying out some potential new areas for the overlay. I just want to make a quick point. Actually, I should start. Sorry, Nick Schleicher, 40 North Worcester Street, Norton. I just want to make a quick point. Although the areas of districts with the elementary schools is correct the way it was presented, I do believe it's kind of very important to note that they're, making sure the residents of Norton understand that if these areas were ever to be developed, there's definitely a potential chance for Norton Public Schools Administration and the school committee for potentially redrawing some district lines for our elementary school. That way we can keep a balance of our students within JCS and LGN. I think it's important to note moving forward for a public record. That is all. Thank you.
Yep, no, thank you, and that's good for everybody to keep in mind in terms of how we look at these properties, but obviously if we put them all in one spot, that doesn't give you a whole lot of flexibility to do much, so. Okay. Mr. Kimball?
I should say Bob Kimball, 51 Pine Street. Just some information on the Tweed property. That was researched about 15, 20 years ago. Just so Paul knows, he can get this information from the water sewer department. We did an extensive survey of that plant down there. That is an industrial plant. It's not designed for residential sewage. It's a whole different technique. So we abandoned the idea. And the other thing that they have, the water department has, is a 21E survey on the property that should be interesting if you want to grab a hold of that too. I know you mentioned the treatment plant, and I think we can't use it for what we'd like to use it for.
Yeah, no, I think the understanding is there's something on the property, whether or not it's usable or not, that would be up to any developer who wanted to touch it. As we mentioned, the town isn't responsible for creating water and sewer access on any of these properties, so.
It was 21B, right?
I just want to confirm, I see, Ms. Brodsky, your hand is still raised. I want to make sure that if you're looking to speak, that's great. If it's just up from before, I'll just ask if you could lower it to save the ADD part of my brain here.
So I did have a quick question. I was just wondering, in light of the recent conversation around the rodeo land, I don't think it's for sale yet. I think there's a developer looking at it, but does that footprint fit the criteria?
Sure. That was not a property that was highlighted as one of the properties that we should look at as part of our process. And at this point, it wasn't noticed to be part of a warrant article for town meeting. So it's not something that we would consider as part of this bylaw at this time.
It would probably absolutely get built if we zone this on the rodeo, just something to consider. Someone already wants to build there, so you can guess that that would be a yes and a no.
So, yeah. So additional comments from anybody in the meeting here? Again, if you're looking to speak in the Zoom call, I'll ask you to use your react function to raise your hand and then introduce yourself, but please.
Bonnie Yasikevich, FinCom, 117 North Worcester Street. So, as a member, there's a lot of things I could say as a resident, but as a member of FinCom, what I will say is that I'm sitting here thinking about what the cost of compliance is that is intentional in terms of site selection versus what the cost of non-compliance in terms of legal ramifications as well as a loss of state grant funding. To me, that's an obvious choice, and so that will inform my voting for the first thing on our business tonight. So.
Thank you. And just to clarify, the planning board has not had its notice meeting on this article, so I don't think that we're really looking for a vote on this one at this time. That's not how it was noticed for us, so.
Are there any rules or issues with us discussing this meeting?
No.
Just make sure.
So additional, oh, I do see a couple of hands raised in the Zoom meeting here. I'm just gonna go with first come, first served here. So the name on the Zoom call is Hans. If you wanna just unmute and just state your name and address for the record, please. And I'll ramble for a second while you, there you go. So are you looking to make a comment? Okay, Hans Heidensen, are you able to speak? Okay. If you see you going back on mute, if you decide you want to speak again, I'll just ramble for a second. If you want, I can come back to you. Mr. Cates, I also see you in the Zoom meeting. If you'd like to unmute and just state your name and address for the record, please, sir.
Hi, thanks for this meeting. And I emphasize, or I empathize with what you're trying to do. And this is the first time I've ever attended such a meeting. But for Norton, so what you're trying to do for Norton to become compliant with the state MBTA requirements, I understand what you're trying to do. But it's baffling to me, and if I may speak for some of my RMV neighbors, at why you would choose RMV, which is a currently settled and vibrant 55 and older community. Why would you choose to put RMV as an overlay district? Why? And to say,
I can answer that.
Rob,
I'm offended that RMV would be used as a placeholder to become state compliant. It sounds shady to me.
Yeah. Thank you for your comments, sir. I think that the reason that that area was chosen as a potential overlay site is that there are people who feel that it would be challenging for things to be built there on top of what you've already developed, which is very lovely, which means that it would have no net impact on the town. A similar example would be in Foxborough, where a portion of the overlay is over Patriot Place. And if somebody's going to put apartments over the stadium at midfield, I have some waterfront property to sell you in Nebraska. So I believe that's the logic behind why Red Mill Village was selected as one of the properties that we're looking at as part of this overlay, in that the current state of the property and the fact that it's newly developed and well built would make it unpalatable for any developer who wanted to take advantage of the MBTA bylaw, and they would simply move on and look to other towns.
Tim, can I add something?
So
Sure.
it still sounds shady to me.
So, since I was the one that was kind of pushing this earlier, the reason I'm behind that, using that area, is that right now it is a beautiful place, and I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. And using that overlay will satisfy the state and allow us to receive those grants without having anything built. So it's literally just an overlay over that area, and we're not expecting any impact to the town from that.
So it sounds like a wink and a nod. Oh yeah, we put something aside, but we realize it's never gonna happen, and therefore we can be compliant, and with a wink, we say, hey, we did what we were supposed to do.
Yes. Absolutely.
Correct.
You're exactly right.
That's exactly what we are trying to do, sir. You are correct.
It has nothing against Red Mill Village. I love Red Mill Village. I think it's gorgeous.
Keep in mind, no change. That is what we are trying to bring about. So all the concerns about traffic and all this other things, I know you've got some speeches on that. A lot of things that it would impact us if it did get built, those don't happen. So they would be red herrings to bring up as a concern with this. This is the idea, is to get it not built. The point that was raised a minute ago was to firm that up, because the way you guys are all individually owned and all, you are the hardest as heck thing in the world for someone to buy up and to drop, replace.
So, I do want to give, I see Hans Heinzen's come off mute again. If you want a chance to speak, I'm just going to go to you directly here.
If we lose our grants, like say we just decide, and I know there's a large movement in this town that wants to just say flat no to anything we come forward with, and that we could be wasting our time in this room right now even trying to come up with an idea. If we don't comply, we lose our grants, that puts a financial burden in the town. As we have previously discussed a lot, going forward and having something built also puts a financial burden on the town. Infrastructure, all those things. So what we're trying to do is not burden the town, and that is why we see that as a very good selection, because if you put it there, nothing happens, and that's what we want. We don't lose our grants, we don't take a hit that way, and we don't have this happening. And as far as all the towns that are legally fighting this and all these arguments, I would like to render that something, by complying and all, that renders that into something we're just watching on the news. The other towns can have that fight with the state, spend money on the lawyers and all that. And that's another point, folks. Fighting would cost Norton money too. We're trying not to have something cost Norton money in the end, and making it so we comply but not getting built is just, it's our only way to do that.
So, Mr. Siegel, I saw you at the podium before. Did you want to make an additional comment?
Oren Siegel, 28 Cotty Road. I'd like the board to take a little bit of a different approach to looking at this situation. What are the impacts on each of these parcels under consideration? Aside from what happens if it's developed or not developed, just the existence of this overlay district applied to their properties. Now, in 4 of these locations, they're all individually owned. So a buyer coming to this property will not care whether there's an overlay district or not, because as a single owner, they have the option of opting to use it or don't use it. In Red Mill Village, that's not the same situation. So you have in Mansfield, you have 32 different unit owners, but each of which has control of whether that is going to apply. So a buyer has no concern over what that implies. Now let's take Red Mill Village. I don't know about you guys, but I haven't been doing this for a year like you have. I've been doing it for about maybe a month and a half. I've seen several meetings. I've reviewed the regulations, and I'm a former commercial real estate attorney practicing for 50 years, and those are the most confusing regulations I've ever worked with. In addition to that, I sat with the planning board for over an hour, planning board director for over an hour, and I had to call the state myself and get 2 clarifications of things that were really inconsistent with what was in the regulations. Now, take it to the next step. Try explaining that to a community of 55 and over. I've worked with our trustee to send out 2 blasts describing what was happening. We had a Zoom call in which we had about 50 residents, 50 people on the call, which basically was pumping like 100 people, because there's 2 people in a residence for most of them. And I can't tell you today that everybody understands what that means. And that's a problem for us, because we're in a community, and forget about, it can never be built, we'll get to that in a minute. But we're in a community that survives on our being able to move those properties and sell them. And if there's a question about that, people will move on to another location. One of the other impacts is a question I had. This board proudly announced, let's do Red Mill Village. Terrific. That's what your vote was, right?
Absolutely.
Do you realize that Red Mill Crossing is not part of Red Mill Village? Yes. I guess not, because it's in your plan. It's in your plan. Yes, it is. It's identified as part of the plan.
This was why I included these names.
Yeah, let's.
Okay, it's right now, the notice that was sent out includes Red Mill Crossing. Red Mill Crossing is basically Kelly's Restaurants, and now it changes every week, the pizza place. Thank you. It changes weekly. with this overlay, they're independent, they're not part of Red Mill Village. They're a single owner. They have over 1 acre of land, and they have the ability to add 2 stories of housing on top of what they have. Now that's really interesting, because basically the parking situation there is horrible to begin with. And one of the concerns I have is if this board is planning to use what's called 7205C2, which is a provision in the regulations that allows them to mitigate the amount of units they have, non-residential units, against the housing requirements, which I believe they were trying to use, I'm not sure. But under that provision, under one of those provisions, it states there can be no minimum parking requirements for non-residential uses as of right. So basically, they can put 2 stories of residential housing and ignore the parking requirements of the existing parking, of the existing retail. Lovely. Right now, I don't know if any of you go there, but on weekends and holidays, it's a mess. Originally, Red Mill Village has had a deeded right to 5 parking spaces. They gave up 2 to accommodate Kelly's. They also allowed Kelly's to park along the street on the weekends as an accommodation. I have no concern that Carol's going to do it today, but eventually she could sell her property. And if she does, there's a very good likelihood that someone looking to maximize their return could add to that, which would really be a mess for Red Mill Village. And thirdly, well, I believe that you all believe that could happen. They're not going to tear down every one of their buildings and build a new one. They're not going to terminate the condominium complex. But I hate to bust your bubble, but you may be misguided in a little bit of that. For one, the requirements for 55 and over and the requirements of age 18 and above are part of our master deed, which can be amended. Hello. A percentage of Red Mill Village residents, not 100%, not every single one of them, can be amended.
67%.
What?
67%. I read your documents.
I'll work on this.
You're wrong, it's 75%. That's okay. You're a manager, that's okay. You manage property, it's 75%. But anyway, if this was happening last year, I said, you're right, it would never happen. But who's going to guarantee me today that Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid are going to be in existence or surviving it in the way it is now within the next 10 years? And how is that going to affect this property? And would that maybe necessitate them, A, reducing the age limit, which they could do, or eliminating the 55 and over community? In which case you have 152 units, which comprise of, what is it? 73 3-bedroom apartments and 82 bedroom apartments that could go on the market immediately without putting a shovel in the ground. Duty to disclose. Looking at those 3 things, what can a buyer ask of us? What may concern us? What duty do we have to disclose that information? I would make these boards aware of Chapter 93A, Unfair and Deceptive Acts or Practices. One of the regulations states it's unlawful, unfair and deceptive to fail to disclose to a buyer a fact that may have influenced the decision not to enter into the transaction. Hello. So, I can't tell you, sitting here, whether there are normal defenses to that, and I'd call upon town council to give us an opinion that says it could never happen. But I don't want to own a property where I stand to be exposed to that kind of problem. None of the other properties have that problem. None of them. And in fact, what boggles my mind is you're looking at Norton Glen. You were talking about something happening immediately. That's 50 years, those properties are 50 years old, they're 53 years old. And they have a Section 8 requirement that goes out to 2033. So nothing can happen until then. What happens in 2033? We lose all those Section 8 housing. Could it be 40B? At that point, 40B may be a problem again if you lose those properties. And they could be building a 40B project, and they could be outside the scope of anything that we're looking at. Then look at Mansfield Avenue. You have, Mansfield Avenue has 32 lots, okay? 14 of which are 0.5 acres. So if all of the 14 developed it, you'd maybe get two units, 3 units. How many students would that be? 3 students on 14 of them? It's less than 50 students. And again, this is that's 32.5 acres. So you can pick and choose some of the developed lots and leave open the smaller lots, and those are non-conforming lots. They're residents that are non-conforming. The same thing with Norton Glen, it's non-conforming. So you have the opportunity over time, with little impact in anything, to put those two together to make something happen that's real and doesn't impact the existing residents. You also have, my understanding from the town council is, from the assessor's office, according to making a non-conforming lot into conforming increases the assessed value. I just see it more of a win. You've got the grants as we're talking about. And I can't, well, this town is trying to pass up $3.5 million worth of grants. So I don't know what the plan is to do. It doesn't make any sense at all. But I know going forward, there's still projects that I understand that they're going to need grants for. We're looking at 140 Route 140 and 123, that intersection. That's going to require something. I can tell you now that that's got to involve something with the state. And if we want to turn our backs to that, good luck. But if as a town, you decide that you want to preserve that, but you're going to pick on Red Mill Village, who has, I think, has some exposure. And whether you believe it or not, that's a fear we all have. You can shake your head, Steve, but that's your opinion. That's your opinion, okay? There are a lot of people on this call, and a lot of people in the village that don't agree with that. But understand, as much as we like this town, and we want to preserve those grants, right now, those grants don't really impact us. On our side, we have brand new water lines, we're protected by sewer, the traffic lights have been introduced.
Unfortunately, we have to make decisions for the whole town.
Excuse me. Let finish, please.
Have been introduced into Leonard Street and 495. And basically, I like to see this town develop. I worked hard for this town. And I'd like to see it develop, but if it comes to the choice of, you're saying, well, we're gonna do this because we don't wanna do anything, it seems reasonable. And you wanna put that all on, a burden on us, I would tell you that from my position, I'm not speaking for anybody else, I think the town loses more by giving up the grants that they're gonna benefit by than I would. And I would really urge this board to, if I were on the board, I would select Glenville Avenue and Mansfield. I see it has the least impact on the town and the most benefit. I mean, you've got 60-year-old properties that you want to just sit there and they'll probably be 40B properties anyway, and they're going to get developed. So why not go with it instead of opposing it? Thank you.
And Orin, before you step away from the podium, I just want to say, make one point that we do have specific parking requirements per residential unit in the bylaw language that we've looked at.
Yeah, but if let me ask you a question. Is the town seeking to qualify under 7205 C2?
I don't believe so, no.
You don't believe so? And I would ask why not? Because under that requirement, if you have non-residential units that qualify, you can reduce the number of housing units that are required. So if you didn't, you should. Thank you.
Thank you, Orin. I think, Steve, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, just a couple quick comments. There's no burden whatsoever. It's an overlay. This isn't changing your zoning for Redmond Village. It's an overlay. I'm very familiar with Chapter 93A. It's a common law in Massachusetts. You're an attorney, so I'm baffled why you would even question that. You're not going to need to present an overlay to a condo buyer. And if you need 75% of owners to change the documents, you're talking over 110, 114 units that are going dissolve the condominium association, which again, I've never seen in 20 years. I haven't even heard of in 30 plus years. Yeah, I mean, there's literally no burden to Red Mill Village. Discussing it and sharing it with your members and your owners should be very simple. There is no burden to Red Mill Village. There's no chance of it being developed, so that there's no burden. I'm not really sure why that's not capable. And I got to say something about that comment. Just because it doesn't impact one person or one area doesn't mean it's not good for the town. We up here have to make decisions that are best for the town, not ourselves. So,
I would also point out the arguments that have been made from certain members up here have been disregarding what was presented earlier, which is basically that the statistics show that moderate increases in the sites I referenced will have no impact, net positive impact between taxes and the like. So continuing to say the sky is falling because of these taxes and school people is just not, it's not validated by the data. And I don't know that you come up with the data to show otherwise. Thank you.
And Rob, if you want to make just comments, we don't want to make cross-examination, but we'll definitely have opportunities at our next session.
Orin, I actually wanted to ask you a question. Would you be willing to come back to the podium, please? Should have stopped there. Anyhow. Okay. Most of your comments, and you're talking about a lot of impacted things, is impact that would occur if this got built and they started acting on this. Am I to assume then that basically your position is, we're mistaken, if we put on Red Mill Village, it's gonna get built?
No.
Okay.
I'm just telling you, I've got to convince a buyer that this has no impact on them. I may have to convince a buyer who sees this and wants me to explain it. And good luck, I'll send them to your house.
Please do.
Okay, good.
Absolutely, because I'll tell them all the other things that benefited the town that came from it. To Steve's point, we are trying to evaluate what's good for Norton. I personally do not believe this hurts you to the degree that you're raising. I felt like that went a bit far. But the idea here is to not get it built because there's other impact to Norton here that we're going to incur if it does get built. But also, I am very concerned that if we don't come to town meeting with a plan that simply isn't going to get built, those people that just want to say no and block it completely, I'm hoping to win some of them to say, okay, we'll do that instead. Because otherwise, there's a huge group of people out there that just want to say no to anything we come forward with. I don't support that. I'm just telling you the reality is they're still out there, and that is how they think. That they're planning, they're just going to wait for town meeting to say no to anything we come with. I am trying to put together something that would be a yes. This is why, and I'm the author of the Red Mill Village thing. You're saying certain people, I'll take that. I looked around town for a place where we could come into compliance and meet this law, but it would not get developed. My first try, as we all know, was the Wheaton Common area, right there with the pond and everything there. I wasn't picturing Wheaton was going to sell that off and let him build apartments.
You also came with the...
But my point was, in bringing up Red Mill, is to benefit Norton by keeping us in compliance without, and not sacrificing the grants. I know you don't care about them, but other people do.
I care about them.
Okay.
I care about them.
Okay. And if I believed that this impact was real, I would tell you, I would have concerns. I would then be worried about dropping it on Norton Glen and the others, because if you're saying that, oh no, it's just going to happen and it's terrible for the people there, then that's true of anybody we drop it on. So if you're saying someone else's backyard, what about the someone else?
That's not what I said.
Okay, but not yours.
No, I didn't say that.
Okay.
The existence of the overlay district has the existing alone has no bearing on those other properties. The buyer of those properties are getting an option. They're selling an option. They don't care. They're getting an option. They do it or they don't do it. In Red Mill Village, there is no option. Basically, my buyer is concerned. He sees an overlay district. What does it mean? And I'm telling you that I don't know, sitting here, I don't know that I could explain that to a buyer and make them comfortable. One other thing that you mentioned at your meeting was, aside from having a zero possibility, you were open to having limited expansion. And basically, you're backing away from that. You mentioned limited expansion, and basically between Glenville Avenue and Mansfield Avenue, there's very limited expansions that work for the town.
I do believe in those places it would actually happen though. Whereas Red Mill Village, I genuinely believe in my heart, it will not get built if we put it on Red Mill Village. My own plan also included East Main Apartments, because my own math said that the Red Mill Village area, and maybe it's not Red Mill Landing, is where, because somebody else said Red Mill Village covers it by itself. My own math said Red Mill Village did not give us enough, and that was why my plan did include East Main Apartments as well. If that's mistaken, we can use just one, but.
Yeah, we'll continue to review this at our next session. I just want to, we don't want
I'm
to.
not pulling out the presentation, don't worry.
Yeah, I do want to give everybody a time check that it is 9:20 and we're on our first agenda item here. So I do see 3 other people, potentially 4, who are looking to speak. Sarah, if you'd like to go next.
Okay, my name is still Howard Wensley, and I still, I think, live at 3 Flint Lane,
Thank you, sir.
Red Mill Village. What I saw on, excuse my voice, what I saw on the screen, the purpose of the zoning was to promote affordable housing. That's not what I'm seeing you proposing. You're not proposing affordable housing, you're proposing no affordable housing.
Correct.
Okay, so why on your zoning you say this is to provide, promote affordable housing? It doesn't connect.
The goal of the bylaw is, the goal of the state's requirement is to promote affordable housing. The goal of our bylaw is to meet with the state requirements.
But you're not doing
How we go about that is yet to be voted.
But you're not doing that. And you're not intending to do that. You're intending to thwart that.
The board has not voted on properties yet.
Well,
Mr. Chair, can I just make a comment on this? You're making a very good point that the law is insufficient in the sense that it gives people, towns, the option to basically come into what's called paper compliance with the law. And so that's what some people, because I want to make sure that we're clear that not everyone on these boards has this opinion, because it has seemed a few times as though people are speaking for everyone on the boards when they should not be doing that. But the point is that the law is written in a way that allows for paper compliance. And it's one of the reasons I think the law is insufficient, because to me, if you really care about increasing affordable housing, and if you really care about lowering the prices, I mean, to me, it's a little crazy to say, you know, we have had a housing building shortage in this state for 50 years or 40 years. We haven't been building enough housing, and the solution to that is to not build any more housing. That's what we've heard tonight from some folks. Okay, so the solution to our supply problem is to not increase supply. That's what we're hearing.
head in the sand.
Okay, head in the sand. Let's not be a community that is in favor of affordable housing or supports affordable housing. Let's instead be a community that doesn't want to be part of solving a serious problem. Let's instead be a community that just engages in paper compliance and then doesn't ever help the situation and doesn't ever affect affordable housing in the state. And then, you know what? We'll just let other towns do it. Because why should Norton have to do it? Okay? So, as far as I know, no one has made this point at any meetings on this topic yet. But the fact of the matter is that what our boards have been talking about doing is voting for something that will never happen. And to me, it's crazy that the law even allows that. That people could come out and say, you know what we're going to do? We're going to approve it with the intent of it never getting done. But because it's a law, that's what it allows. So you're making a very good point, but the fact of the matter is that the law allows it. So yes, we can have free and open conversations up here saying, You know what we're never gonna do? We're gonna pick a place we're gonna put it in a pond, that this place would never get built. We could, and do that, and that's what these boards are discussing right now.
Okay, and I have a very real problem with that. Also, I want to put it back in front of the group that the water and sewer concerns are off the table. This developer or the town needs to make no concessions whatsoever for water or sewer. So that's not an issue whether we have enough water, don't have enough water, we don't have a distribution system, our sewage system can't take it. That's not part of this. The developer himself will either have to put an on-site system, a private well, or do whatever is necessary to put in the distribution system. Another question, did you deduct the conservation acreage from Red Mill? Because that 51 acres at Red Mill encompasses some significant conservation area. So what is the actual acreage?
All of the parcels have gone through a secondary review with Serped, who's our regional planning agency, as part of a compliance modeling process.
So you haven't done that yet?
That has been done, yes.
So what is the deduction from those 51 acres?
Paul, do you have that available, or is it?
Well, if you think these other things of the laws are wonky, here's another one. We can count it toward the 50 acre requirement. But think of it this way, you can never develop it. You have 14 acres right in conservation restriction. You can take those units and move them to a developable area. So it is, we are aware of the 14 or 15 acre, but according to our consultant, we still can use it as part of the overall.
I don't think that's what I saw on the screen though. Sharpa said you have to exclude conservation restricted areas.
We do. Right, and it's, again, that wouldn't be something you could ever develop, but you can transfer the units off of that area somewhere else. Again, it's a mathematical formula.
So you're telling me of that 51 acres, you've determined that 15 acres are in conservation restrictions?
Well, as you know, they are, so that nothing changes, that conservation restriction.
I'm asking, what does the town see that's in that parcel for conservation?
It would remain conservation.
But what is the acreage?
It was, I believe it was 14 acres in the conservation restriction, 14 or 15.
Okay.
18.5, okay.
Okay, so that's...
Again, the slides that are shown
a big chunk of that 51 acres.
The slides that are shown are a high-level view. All of them have gone through our regional planning agency for compliance modeling.
Okay, also it is my understanding that Red Mill Crossing, i.e. Kelly's, is on the map. And that could easily be converted to this use. And given the fact that for the right price, I would guess the Kellys would be out of here in a minute, and you would be seeing development on that property. Also, you noted that you didn't look at the rodeo property, but what is the acreage? Do you know what the acreage could be if you chose that property?
It's not something we can consider as part of this article, so I'm not even going to dive into that tonight. We haven't noticed it for town meeting, so there's no way we could bring it to town meeting if we wanted to.
I'm not asking you to bring it to town meeting, I'm just asking you.
Haven't even looked at it.
Was it reviewed, and what was the acreage?
It was not reviewed, and I can't speak to the acreage.
Okay. Just another update on CHAPA funding was noted by one of the speakers from Red Mill. I took a look at the CHAPA annual report, and CHAPA is funded by 121 sponsors in the amount of $100,000 plus down to $1,000 plus. Overall budget, I think, of $1.2 million is what I saw. And the state agency that involved in funding, which recently changed their name to Executive Offices of Housing and Livable Communities, I believe it is. Keep trying to confuse the public. Was in there for an amount of $2,000 to $5,000 So that is what the contribution from the state is. Contribution from other involved parties is $100,000, I'm sorry, $10,000 up, down through $1,000. And the state funding for that is minuscule in regards to what other agencies have given. And just as a disclosure, the last 20 years of my life, I retired a year and a half ago, I was in the area of affordable housing, and I worked for Metro Housing Boston, which is an agency that provides and supports affordable housing, primarily through subsidies, Section 8, and mass MRVPs, which my guess, given what's going on in that place called Washington right now, I'm not confident that a lot of the Section 8 vouchers and the funding for that is going to be around much longer. So the situation is going to get worse, a hell of a lot worse. And we can't sit with our head in the ground saying, go someplace else. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
My name is also still Val Cabral, and I also still live at 50 Mansfield Avenue. I have a couple of small comments. One is it would be really cool, I know that the law lets us do it, but could we stop maybe saying that we just want to not follow the law on recorded lines when we know that the Attorney General is looking at everything related to all of this and talking about suing municipalities? It probably would violate open meeting law if you just went around telling everyone, I hate this law, I don't want us to comply with it. But it's a little bit disheartening to me that folks who are elected in this town are standing in front of us saying, hey, I don't like this law. I don't think we should do anything that will actually make it be able to be complied by in the spirit that it was written. Obviously, there are issues with it, as Kevin Snyder noted, but I'm just getting a little tired of hearing that we as a town are deliberately looking to circumvent the law of the state of Massachusetts. To thinking about the whole town, since folks are trying to suggest that Red Mill Village is not a big enough constituent, how many people showed up to a fall town meeting? Like 150, maybe 200? So if there are 153 units at Red Mill Village, and all of them turn out to the next town meeting because they agree with Warren and the other folks who have spoken about their concerns, you guys don't think that they could tank this vote on their own? Y'all are confident. Well, we'll just put it over 274 East Main Street. It'll never get built, and the town will pass it at town meeting. This town voted, 1,775 people voted 4 years ago to keep a town meeting form of government, and a couple hundred show up every single time. If that does not already include Red Mill Village, and it does at the next town meeting, you are setting yourselves up for failure by saying, well, we're just going to put it over Red Mill if Red Mill doesn't want that. If all of them agree with you, if that's your gamble, I get that. But if they don't, you're putting yourself in some real hot water. Thank you.
That is certainly a consideration that we evaluated. Rob, I think you wanted just to make...
Go ahead, Rob.
Okay. Excuse me?
I said go ahead.
She said go ahead.
Yeah.
You were saying that we were trying to not follow the law with this, but then what part of doing that is against the law?
I'm not saying, I said that Kevin made the point that it's not against the law. Technically, it's against the spirit of the law, which is why I said the spirit of the law specifically.
And would the town just saying screw the law and voting it down at town meetings, that would be against the law now, wouldn't it?
We would, in fact, be in the position that I felt we were after Fall Town meeting, where we said, hey, screw you, Massachusetts, we don't want your grant funding.
And I'm against doing that.
Yeah, I agree, but I think you're in the same position with Red Mill. I think if these boards and folks would instead say, do not calm down me, Rob Welsh.
Okay, don't calm down.
If these boards were saying instead, you know, none of us like this law that much. I don't think it was written well. Bridget, for example, has talked about her concerns with it in the past. I've heard all of that. If we said, we don't really love this law, but here are a couple of options that aren't actually that offensive. We're not talking about TPC Boston. We're not talking about using a ton of commercial land instead of it having been commercial or industrial development. If we instead put a good faith effort in here and said, here are a couple of parcels that this could potentially work on, and we're not trying to say, let's put it somewhere it can never be built, I have to hope that especially if more than a couple hundred people turned out to town meeting, we would actually get this passed in a way that would satisfy the state and that would not cause folks like Red Mill Village to feel like they're gonna have trouble if they're selling their properties or doing anything like that in the future. Sorry.
Thank you. I see a couple people waiting over there on the wall. I do see another hand raised in the Zoom meeting. Rob, if you wanted to lower your hand, just to...
No, I haven't done that.
You still wanted
Put it
to...
up here because I have.
if you wanted to...
It's okay, why don't you let Gerard go next, or Mark.
Mr. Cates, did you want to say something further, sir?
Yes, I wanted to say that the woman that just spoke and the board member that spoke, saying that basically you're skirting your responsibilities. And you're, in my opinion, you know what Bill Belichick used to say, do your job. And I don't think you're making a good faith attempt at this. You're skirting the issues. And you're real, and in my opinion, you're part of the problem and not the solution.
Thank you for your comments, sir. I think I'll just say every member of the board is speaking on their own behalf, not speaking for the board position in general. So
I'm
just
part of
to
the problem,
clarify.
not Tim, just to be clear.
Rob, that was not my intention.
Okay, no, just clarify.
I'm just...
I'm the one that's part of the problem, I will take that by myself.
There was a majority vote from every member on this board, for each of these parcels that are showed on the screen. It was a different majority for each one, but there was a majority for each of these parcels. And they each had their own pluses and minuses. So, did you have anything else, Rob, that you wanted to say, or did you want Mr. Sweeney to go next?
Mark, and then I'll...
Okay.
Mark Sweeney, 14 Laurel Lane. So we all agree it's gonna go in one of these 4 parcels, because we had a meeting back in December where we decided which ones we want. We settled on these. You've notified the neighbors. It's gonna go, you're gonna offer one of these. Are you gonna offer more than one, do you think?
Can you go
Option?
to,
Or just one?
the slide number here? No, I'm not thinking.
You might have some,
slide 42, Paul? I think this is probably,
all right, so
there may be some movement in here, but I think those are probably the 4 combinations, maybe something, a variation of one of these is probably what would be put forward in
will
town
you
meeting.
go with more than one? Like we had an override of 4 million and 6 million. We
No,
had
we're
2.
putting one article at town meeting.
One article, one location.
That's what this board will
And
vote
so
on
the
next.
idea here is to keep everybody happy, and I know it's gonna, if we go to Mansfield Ave, that means there's a good, in Norton Glen, we could get 175 units. Mansfield Ave and Tweed, we could get 175. Red Mill, no, it's not gonna happen. Norton Glen and Tweed, no, it's not gonna happen. I'm sorry, it could happen. Red Mill would be the one, in my opinion, it could happen. So yes, we are trying to not bring in 100, we're trying to stop, yes. The idea is to stop us from bringing in 175 units that we cannot support water-wise, traffic-wise, and especially school-wise. You're gonna have a problem with the school. Just talking to the, I'm not gonna speak to the superintendent, but she was worried about it. It's where it's gonna go. She's gonna have to rezone things, as Nick said. So we basically wanna do the idea of bringing it over to Red Mill, getting the grants that was spoken about over here, still get the grants and not bring in all the kids and the problem. So yes, it's gotta go somewhere. It's gonna go one of those 4, and right now, the idea is to go with Red Mill, in my opinion.
Thank you for your opinion. Rob, did you want to?
Well, no, before I go, she's been waiting over at that window for a very long time, to be honest.
Well, I think I'm going for it.
I know. I've been watching that. I'd like to let you get your turn. It's more important than mine.
Oh, okay, thank you. Bridget Carr, Oak Street. I kind of lost what I originally came up here for, but I guess I'll just speak personally for, as Rob mentioned, I'll speak personally for a minute on Will, for your last name. thank you for your presentation. I know this is the second time you come to one of these, at least that I was at. It's very solid and I appreciate all the information and the effort. I would like to say a lot of what he spoke about, he said he was 27, I'm 25, I turned 26 this year. I still live in Norton, I still live at home. So I am pretty much the demographic of what was trying to be solved with this bill. Now, as Val mentioned, I have spoke to my dislike of it, and Kevin spoke to a lot of what I think was, it's a rock and a hard place, but it's not new, it's been around since 2021. But it would be great, outside of this bill, housing is still a problem, it's not going away, and it would be great if even maybe 10 years down the line, something were to happen to come from this. Red Mill was a bit of a last throw-in, I think, for the past few planning board meetings. It came up kind of later, so I don't really have a well-formed opinion yet based on not hearing the public hearing. But personally speaking, I think I would like it to maybe, at this time, right now with this information, be Mansfield Ave, Norton Glen, potentially. I don't know, Twee seems like it has a lot of issues. And yeah, I don't really know if that follows any sort of thought process at all, but that's all I have to say for now. Thanks.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I was going to say, I think the challenge for this that the planning board has had is trying to find the balance with what makes sense, what follows the law, and what we feel can be approved at town meeting. And those are the competing priorities that we've had to deal with, which are challenging. And I'm not blind to the fact that if this doesn't work long-term in the state, there's nothing that stops the state with coming down with the new regulation of the day in 5 years that doesn't have as much flexibility, because the state will do what it wants to do, and we just have to ask them how high we're supposed to jump this time. So,
I was going to say, so.
Rob, did you want to?
Yeah.
Did you want to make your comments here?
Yeah, I would be at this thing, first of all, if we want to label it part of the problem, fine, but that is me. I was the author of the Red Mill. It was actually presented to those that are saying it was sprung on lately. That's actually not true. I presented it last fall. At the time though, I think you all know, I did a lot of research around town in different areas and presented, I think by the time I was done, 15 different places and spoke to the pros and cons. So, you know, some of them obviously what you're looking at weren't good ideas. Red Mill was part of that. At the time, we liked Wheaton Center better, and so we didn't talk about it as much. My goal is unashamedly, unabashedly to put it somewhere where it won't happen. I don't want Norton to take this on. Now, as far as the Belichick and our responsibilities to do our job, honestly, I don't think that is our job. I don't feel a responsibility for Norton to help bail out the state. And I was elected to this board by Norton. I'm working for Norton and what's best for Norton. I am admittedly disinterested in helping the state. It's all about Norton for me, and so that's why I come in that way. And then we talked about the law, I covered another point. But that's what I say. If you guys want to blame someone, blame me. I was the author of it. It's kind of sorry, I'm going to sit here.
Majority of the members voted to put it on the notice, so it's not just you.
They did, but I'm going to feel, you know my style. If there's a beating, I'll just take it myself. So blame me. But that is my thinking. I unashamedly say I'm not interested in helping the state. I'm here to help Norton and do whatever I think is best for Norton, nothing else. So all those accusations are true. I'm very good to with Val and the individual in here.
Are you still making a comment? I mean, I feel like we're really at a disadvantage here. You're talking in circles, Rob. I apologize. I've been standing up here for a while. I'll let you finish.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, so I'm Gavin Cabbage. I'm from the FinCom. I'm going to start off with a real softball question. Barrows Court, I know there's some flooding at Barrows Court. That's across Barrows Street, so the Barrows property is just totally unrelated. Okay, so less softball comments than that. I believe that if you're going to do something, you should do it right. I think that the chance for this town to do this, to comply with this, doing it right, was last fall with the good faith presentation or proposal that the planning board brought before us. That was the actual proposal that would actually move the needle on the housing crisis in this state. I will vote yes on whatever this board votes on, because ultimately all of these are equally
problematic and imperfect to me, and I just want the town to be in compliance so we can all move on. I don't think any of them will really move the needle significantly. So that's where I stand. I do want to answer a question that Zach brought at the beginning of this, 3 hours ago at this point, it seems like. He asked, what
was that question again?
Yeah, exactly. You asked, what would you say to the people who bought their house 5 or 10 years ago who are now underwater because you lowered housing costs? I bought my house in Norton 3 years ago. I have no concerns at all that I will ever be underwater based on what I've seen in this state. That's honestly a strange. I'm surprised by that idea, because I've gained 50 grand on it, I think, since I've moved, and that's mitigated by the interest rates that have gone up. It's not going to happen. I'm not concerned, and honestly, if it did happen, as long as I didn't lose my house, I'd be elated, because some of my friends would actually be able to afford a house, because I'm the only one from my college class that I know, good friends who own a house, and that's because I'm a software engineer, getting the money from big old California. The rest of my graduating class are actually doing things like this fellow here, actually helping the world. They're getting paid shit, frankly, and they can't afford houses in the States.
And I just want to echo a live public meeting that we cannot edit in post.
Oh, I apologize. That's fair. And I will close by saying and echoing the disappointment in the folks who want to skirt this law. I think you're really doing us all a disservice. I understand you want to keep Norton the same. Norton is part of the state. When you put your return address on an envelope, you write Norton, Massachusetts. And I think you forget that sometimes. So thank you.
So,
I want to ask him something.
I'm going to go for cross-examination.
So,
I do see with the microphone, there's somebody in the Zoom meeting who hasn't been able to raise their hand, so I just want to get to Mr. Turgeon, if you wanted to just unmute and speak, please.
Yeah, and thank you, and I'll be quick, and I guess I just want to voice a concern, and it's simply, look, I follow the news like I know a lot of folks do here, and I think Governor Healy's plans, intentions are pretty well publicized, and I do have a concern about this being, I don't know if I want to call it a Trojan horse, if you will, but the idea being they're looking to house illegal immigrants, or immigrants, however you want to call them. And this is their way of trying to get a supply of housing as quickly as they can. And so I have a real concern about that.
Thank you for your comment. I think there's no way for us to control what happens to these properties if and when they are ever developed. My expectation is that the state is would probably not pay top dollar for developing any of these properties. So that's my opinion. You can take that for what it's worth. I don't think that that's something that I would consider with these properties.
I want to add, and this is just being truthful, this doesn't work very well. I looked for that, sir, for whether this was a Trojan horse and all. Looked hard. I think some of y'all know I was thinking that. Did not find it. I could not find proof. I won't say I didn't find things were hints that she's thinking that way, but I was not able to establish that as a fact, and I did try hard. If I'm honest, I'll say I could not. I would be presenting it here if I had that. That was why I was looking for it.
Hello, Paula Daniels, FinCom, 54 Power Street. This is a joint meeting. I just wanted to kind of come back to the process here. I know that your deadline is April 10th, that you want to have something complete to present to our town meeting on May 19th. I just want to bring it back to our joint meeting. I think that the boards need to be able to share their opinions. I think we've only been able to hear from a few people. So I think if you're looking for opinions from other members of the boards, I'm just here to do that. So I think the Mansfield Ave and Norton Glen one is one that I would support. I am also in favor of the spirit of this law to hopefully create some more affordable housing. From a personal perspective, I work in the nonprofit world, and I've been seeing nightmares of families being evicted, not being able to find affordable housing once they are evicted. It's just a nightmare out there. Heartbreaking stories I see every day at work. So that's just my opinion. Okay, thank you very much for all of your hard work on this.
Thank you. And appreciate the redirection here. I do want to make sure that if there are other members of the select board or FinCom or planning board who wanted to add their comments, I think the planning board would probably made a lot of our comments over the past several months, but
Tim, I just had a question. Is Mike Units on?
I know he was at one point. I'm not sure if he still is.
Well, we're on like, what, hour 5 now? My question is, do we need to vote this tonight by either FinCom or the select board? Okay.
You do not.
So I'm looking for a
Mr. Chair, so I think typically the select board would wait for a recommendation from the planning board.
Yes, you'll get that after our next meeting.
Yeah, my concern was the 10th date, so that's perfect.
Yep. Okay. Additional comments, questions, concerns at this point? Otherwise, we move on to the second bylaw discussion of our joint meeting. And that's before we get to the regular planning board agenda, everybody. Okay.
Excuse me, Tim?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I have to.
Understood, thank you.
I'm gonna have
Okay. Paul, did you want to just give a quick overview of the recodification here? And as Paul pulls this up, I'll just do, this is another bylaw that the town has been, planning board's been working on for probably a year. This is a recodification of the zoning bylaw. Basically means, everybody, just to try and keep your conversations in the hallway or to a minimum, please. Takes our existing bylaw, takes it apart, and puts it back together in a way that makes sense, while also updating it for errors, inconsistencies, new things that have been added to state law, things that case law has found that we put in the 70s and is now illegal, all sorts of fun stuff like that. As you can see here, improved usability, consistency, legal defensibility. We want to make it make sense, make it easy to use, and make it so we don't get sued. Those are pretty much 3 good principles of this.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, I apologize. I have to leave as well, so we're gonna have to close our meeting out.
Okay.
Right, because we won't have a quorum, so we're just going to adjourn the select board meeting, but since we're not voting on anything, Denise and I will stay as observers,
Sure.
but we will be closing our meeting now. So I didn't want to interrupt you, but I also didn't want you to get too far.
Did you want to
into
make a
it.
motion?
Yeah, so I'm going to make a motion for the select board to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, good. Thank you all for
Thanks,
coming.
Tim, sorry about that.
Understood. Nope. Not unusual, so, but yes. So, as we get into the bylaw here that we have done, the previous bylaw has definitions scattered everywhere in this bylaw. What the consultant that we've been working with, who has probably done half or more of the zoning bylaws in the state, took all of them out and put them in one section in the back. So if you want to know what something is, turn to section 11. All the definitions are there. They no longer conflict with each other, so you don't have one definition in section 5 that says one thing, and wait, it says something similar in section 7. Which one do I use? All of it's there. So, some of the big changes that we're highlighting, new language that complies with the state's new accessory dwelling regulations. These came out, I want to say, last fall. The state's regulations conflicted with our existing bylaw, and basically the state said you have until a certain deadline or your next town meeting to put these in, so we are putting them in. Big changes include that ADUs are allowed by right, there are size requirements. The state says you can no longer require that the owner has to be there, and there also is no allowance for requirements that they have to be attached. So you can have a detached accessory dwelling unit, or like a detached in-law apartment, so to speak. So we're just putting in what the state told us to put in for that one. Other revisions, to comply with case law, we're removing a provision stating the creation of 6 lots triggers 10% of the lots to be affordable. That is something that our consultant flagged as not consistent with current case law. We also reduced citing requirements for adult entertainment uses. They were previously 1,000 feet from all non-industrial zoning districts or other establishments. We've adjusted that to 500. That is a free speech requirement. The ability to have an adult establishment is a provision of free speech. Our existing bylaw basically made it so you could have put it one location in town, which is generally what our consultant felt is below the percentage of zonable land that makes you an easy target for somebody to sue you. So by decreasing that, we've now increased it from I think maybe 1 lot to 6 lots, a dozen lots, all within the industrial zone, mostly within Norton Commerce Center, and maybe the very, very back of the Valentine Tool property in the wetlands. Is that what you?
There's a section that technically is in the Valentine Tool property, but it's all wetlands.
Yeah.
Swamp out there.
So, yes. And the other adjustment that we've made to improve the quality of development, we've changed the design guidelines to standards within village commercial zoning that gives them more teeth, rather than, this is a guideline, please follow it, we'd like you to. It is a standard, so it's a little bit stronger there. The other thing that we adjusted is the standards for approving special permits. These are the conditions of approval the planning board looks at for every special permit. You can see the before and after. We think that this gives us a lot of additional teeth. I think we also added one that's, yeah, do you think that, and yeah, that expands the tables, the general uses. We're trying to group similar uses together. Right now, the end of the zoning use table has a miscellaneous, we couldn't fit it anywhere else section. We've removed that and tried to align everything, grouping similar uses. And then we're adding to the use table and definitions. So you can see the before and after. If it didn't fit in residential, open space, commercial, industrial, it went in miscellaneous. We've now built out a lot more structure around that. Most of what is allowed in each zone has generally not changed. I think there have been a couple of nips and tucks around the edges. But in most cases, it's just a reorganization for clarity and simplicity. And then again, the timeline. We're here this evening. We have our planning board meeting on the 8th, and the final warrant is due on the 10th. So this article was properly noticed by the Sun Chronicle. So if the Finance Committee would like to vote on it, you do have the ability to. So I'll leave that to you. And if there are any additional questions from members of the Finance Committee or anything else. This one's much more boring than the other one.
Well, we're all tired.
Amen.
Create some controversy.
Try to avoid controversy where I can. I'm in the wrong line of volunteer work.
We tried with the adult entertainment.
So, additional comments, questions, concerns about any of the adjustments here, we can pull up any section if you'd like to look at it. At town meeting, we would be proposing a similar presentation overview. It would also be a clean version and kind of a highlights document of what was changed by section.
And it's online. You all the boards did receive the latest version of it, so it's out there for everybody to see.
Yes, and we understand that when we bring this to town meeting, we're going to get people going, how am I supposed to read this tonight? It's 140 pages. This is why we're giving all the summary documents and why we're giving this overview presentation. There is nothing we can do to stop that comment at town meeting. We know it's coming. All we can do is prepare accordingly. But obviously with everybody's support and being on board and understanding, yes, I've looked at this, yes, this all makes sense. If I had any questions, the planning board answered them.
Madam Chair, question. Are there any properties that are in compliance with the existing laws that would be out of compliance with the new zoning laws? Does that make makes sense. Does that question make sense to you? Hopefully I understand how zoning works.
So the question was if there are any properties that are non-conforming, which would become
No, in
conforming.
compliance, that would be compliance now, but not out of conforming.
I don't believe that any of the changes we've done would create any new additional non-conforming uses.
And I guess
And I'll caveat that they don't believe in that there's so many properties in town I don't believe that we have in the changes that we've done. If anything, I think our goal has been to go in the opposite direction where it made sense. But most of the adjustments that we've made have been organization and structure. We had a lot of discussions about, what about this? Does this make sense? Should we change it? We made a couple of those changes, and other ones we had discussions, we talked them through and went, is this recodification or is this a zoning bylaw change? I know, Steve, you have a lot of ideas that we kind of put in that second category and said, we'll come at these maybe another day. But also had a lot of ideas that also made sense. So that's the process that we've gone through over the past year, going through the bylaw section by section repeatedly.
So to restate, nobody who's doing something should have to change. They're having chickens, whatever. We wouldn't expect anybody to have to change that. Like I, for example, have chickens, so I checked that part of the use table for myself. It looks good.
If you go back 10 years, that actually changed about 7 years ago.
Okay.
We changed it because before, to have any chickens, you needed a special permit from the planning board. And we changed it, so if you had, I forget the number now.
12.
We went a certain number of chickens, but no roosters, we don't care.
Yeah.
Just go through the Board of Health.
As a matter of fact, for that in particular, it actually got changed from chickens to poultry, so you can have quail now.
Okay.
So.
Only 12 though, unless I get a permit. No, that's good. And I appreciate that too. I went back to the building in the fall. There were a lot of ideas, but I definitely agreed should be separate articles so they can be considered and discussed individually. I appreciate you just tried to reorganize here.
Yeah, no, we didn't want to, as many of the ideas went, this makes sense, we should do it. If it was more than a nip and a tuck, we didn't want people to come in and go, well, you told us it was a recodification, but I looked at this and this is wildly different than the existing. Some things are different. One thing that's may jump off the page to somebody is like section 1, which is like the purpose of the bylaw. But as a consultant went through at the last meeting, that doesn't have any legal standing in anything where anybody tries to file an appeal on a decision that we made. So it's just fancy, fluffery words. So, yeah. Okay. I'm not seeing any hands raised in the Zoom. Mr. Siegel, I do see you over at the window there, if you wanted to just make a comment here.
Orange Siegel, 28 Cotting Road. First, I'd like to compliment the board. They did a real Herculean job. The bylaws needed to be updated. They needed to be made clearer, and I think they really did a good job in doing that. However, part of the new table of uses added some things that are head scratchers, and I don't understand why they're being proposed, and I just want to call them out. The first one is, we had under mobile homes, temporary, as requiring a building permit. They've taken away the word temporary, which means in a zone residential 80, 60, or 40, you can have a mobile home as a permanent residence as its primary use. I don't know, if I'm living in an 80,000 square foot lot, but I built a home, I really wouldn't be happy with a permanent mobile home next to me. I also question for the town itself, what's the taxes on a mobile home? Why would we want to encourage someone to put a mobile home on an 80 square foot lot and lose the value of, I don't even know if does the real estate tax apply to a mobile home? I don't know, but certainly that's a valid question for me. In addition to its impact on its neighbors. Certainly temporary there, I understand that, people bring it up for the season, they want to park it behind their house. Then it's a question the planning board can decide. But under this, it becomes a primary residence, and I didn't understand it. The other thing is just a technical one. And they changed senior housing to a senior housing facility. I know why they did it. There's a definition of senior housing facility. But if you look at the definition clearly, for some reason, it doesn't include senior housing. It's just a workaround, and I just asked the board to take a really close look at it, because 8.3 goes through it. It says, for purposes of evaluating 8.3, in 8.3, senior housing is defined as. Then if you look at 8.3, it doesn't mention the word senior housing. So I just think that's some clarification the book we want to take another look at. The other one is recreational small-scale indoor. That we used to read small-scale indoor, and it was not allowed in any of the residential districts. They now added this recreational small-scale indoor. And if you give me a minute, the definition of it. Includes establishments that provide amusement, entertainment, physical fitness, indoor for fee, may require membership. They also include food and beverages. Such uses are not limited to arcades, art, dance, exercise studios, martial arts, indoor swimming pools, tennis, handball, pickleball, badminton, racquetball, and golf simulations. I've gone to, I have 4 grandchildren, and I've gone to a lot of their facilities. Those facilities are huge. There's no limitation on size. Even though it says small, there's no limitation on size. And those facilities on a weekend, or even during the week, they turn over, I'd say 120 people on an hour or 2-hour basis. They're huge and they're massive. And I don't know why we want to start introducing a really legitimate commercial use into these residential areas, even with a special permit. And that's something new, and I don't know what triggered that. It's certainly not in line with the updating of our bylaws. And the last 2 are both new. One is a brewery or winery, and then a retail neighborhood. While there is certainly, as farming, a vineyard would be appropriate, and if they had a brewery as an accessory use, I understand it. But a brewery or a winery as a primary use is a commercial use. And why we're starting to introduce commercial uses into residential areas, I just don't understand. Yeah, there's a planning board approval, but with all due deference, this town has been reluctant to stand behind the planning board even when it opposes certain uses, and basically it goes to court and they end up coming back and getting what they need. And so the fact that you're putting the planning board's permitting approval on those types of uses makes no sense to me. They're commercial, and they shouldn't be next door to a residential. I understand there's a need to find more commercial space in this property, but you've got to really recognize the rights of the residential owners that have invested in the properties around them. And to put those properties in the middle of a residential community just seems the opposite of what zoning should be doing. And the same thing is now with the retail neighborhood. And again, that's trying to get to a smaller use, and it's the definition under this is retail or service no greater than 100,000 feet, such as newsstands, boutiques, barbershops, salons, such that the owner can operate no more than 3 employees. It's a business. And so, yeah, it's nice to have them in the VC, the village commercial areas, or some of those. That's what those are for. But to start introducing them as part of the residential communities of our town just seems to be inappropriate at this stage if we're really just looking to codify and update these bylaws. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren.
I don't mind addressing a couple of them.
Sure, Steve.
Yeah, okay, so as far as the mobile home, one, I think it's just I guess it's a difference of concern between my opinion and Oren's opinion. Mobile home is a home like any other. It's often the only thing that's affordable to anybody at this point. Most people can't afford to build a $500,000 or $800,000 home right now, and mobile home might be the only option. The idea that somebody doesn't want to live next to it assumes that anybody that's in the mobile home is going to make it look like trash, and that somebody that's in a home is going to automatically take care of it. It's not always the case. You know, with all due respect to Orrin, you have a lot of great opinions, but you also don't seem to want a lot of things built near you. And you live in a community that has rules. A mobile home's not going to go near you. So, but to go with your other concerns, which are, in my opinion, more valid. Small-scale indoor recreation. I offered a small change to the definition of that. I also recognize that there is not a scale applied to it, and I would be perfectly fine not putting that in the residential zone. It's not a battle I need to fight right now. Brewery and winery. Also, something we mentioned at the last meeting. Not sure why it's still zoned for residential. It doesn't have to be. Another battle I don't need. So, yeah, you're fine to correct those ones. No problem with that.
And this is our next meeting after we discussed this at our last session, so. Additional comments from planning board, FinCom, anybody else? Okay.
Wait, there is one more. He mentioned about the senior housing. And that is something that I noticed. I sent an email to Paul about where the definitions that Mark provided and the uses table wording are inconsistent with each other. Where we lost the ability to zone only a 55 and over community, we attached senior housing facility to it, which includes like senior housing care or senior care. But then we also removed or divided up our category that was hospitals, nursing homes, convalescent homes. And we, instead of adding long-term care facility to hospitals and nursing or infirmaries, we just tucked it into senior care facility. And that's an error. We should fix that. I've recommended the fix already.
Okay. Additional comments from anybody here?
Oh, there's one more. He didn't bring it up. This is my time now. So, self-storage facility. That's still on the list.
Discussion about whether that needs to be carved out from warehouse or not, I think is the open item there.
Yeah, and still as a by right in village commercial, and that's a new addition that we don't need in my opinion.
Additional comments? Otherwise, from the joint meeting perspective, this is the last item for the FinCom here. Is other questions, comments you wanted to raise, actions you wanted to take, or whether you'd like to vote and or adjourn anything further?
So I'm assuming that you guys were meeting on the 8th, things will be prepared by the 10th, so the 14th, our meeting on the 14th will be when we can discuss this potentially and maybe for our agenda purposes.
Paul, does that make sense to you? Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have it done before the 10th.
I just like to have a plan.
Right.
Yeah, so it's just, the question was just in terms of timing for final language to FinCom, so. Yes.
Yeah, we've got a couple days.
Yeah. Okay.
Great, thank you.
All the time in the world.
Anything further?
One quick one. Is there any, you mentioned these changes will make us less likely to get sued, which is a significant financial cost for the town, because lawyers are expensive. Is there anything concrete there? Like, was there anything like, or is it just like the general being unionized and not disagreeing with itself should help with that?
I would say that the one that I highlighted about the affordability in 6 lots is one that is very clearly against current case law, and it is something that we would look at in any new subdivision. So if it wasn't changed, that would be a problem if we tried to enforce it and we got called on it.
Great.
We have tried to enforce it, we have not gotten called on it to this point.
Thank you.
Is there a way you can shop those too? I don't think she knows it's on. Oh, well, she
No,
probably
there's
doesn't
not.
have, but I didn't.
Definitely doesn't know she's 20 feet tall.
This, no, there is no, I don't believe there's a way to turn off anybody's camera now.
Getting broadcast
Yes.
unknowingly.
So if there's nothing further, I don't know if you want to take any action here.
I think we want to wait till your
Yeah,
recommendations. Yeah.
The action would be then to adjourn probably then, unless you wanted to say something more.
Yes, no, I don't think that we should do. I move that we adjourn at 10:14 PM. All in favor? Aye.
Okay. We're still here, so don't be too jealous, don't be too happy leaving.